Today we are debating nationalism versus anti-fascism, and we're starting right now. Hey everybody, thrilled to have you here for this epic debate. This is going to be a lively one, folks. I have no doubt about that. And if it's your first time here, consider hitting that subscribe button, as we have a lot more debates coming up. So for example, on the bottom right of your screen, you'll see this Thursday, there's a triple threat debate: communism versus socialism versus capitalism, which should be a blast. And also want to let you know, we are a neutral channel. So in other words, we have no actual positions as a channel. And as a moderator, my goal is to be as neutral as possible in not taking any stances. So with that, we are going to jump right into this. We are very excited for this one, folks. I do want to introduce our guests. So first, I'm just going to quick give you their names, and then we'll get rocking and rolling. So we have Brenton and Caleb, who will be representing the anti-fascism side tonight. And then we'll also have Eric and Mike. They'll be defending the nationalism, or as they've also called it, the third positionism. So with that, very excited, folks. This is going to be a lot of fun. If you have a question, fire it into the old live chat. And if you tag me with an @ModernDayDebate, it makes it a little bit easier for me to be sure that I see every question that you put in that live chat, so I can put it in the list. Super chat is also an option. In that case, if you ask a question, you can also make a comment toward the speakers, to which they, of course, would have the chance to respond to. And we ask that you be your usual friendly selves for that part. Be warned, I will not read every super chat in the event that it may be, especially if it violates our only rule at the channel, which is no hate speech. We won't read those, and those would be deleted. So with that, we are very excited for this one, folks. We're going to jump into it right now. So going first, it's going to be a 5-minute statement from Eric, followed by a 5-minute opening from Brenton, and then Mike, and then Caleb. And those are flexible 5-minute opening statements, so the speakers don't have to use the full 5 minutes. They can use whatever they would like for that portion. And very excited to have you here, gentlemen. So Eric, the floor is all yours for your opening statement.
Okay, I'm Eric Stryker. I run a publication called National Justice, National-Justice. I do a podcast on TRS called Strike and Mike. So what I'm going to talk about now is what it means to be a third positionist. The third position is a radical opposition to the left and the right. In today's neoliberal order, the right has abandoned the nation, and the left has abandoned the working class. The minoritarian impulse of globalism is not in the interest of the majority, nor was it brought about with their consent. We seek to combine what has been lost in a synthesis that will finally give the people what they've always wanted. As nationalists, we stand for the dignity and liberation of European-descended Americans who today are a stateless and besieged people denied advocacy and rights. According to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, men of European descent are denied protections from discrimination and privileges. According to the writings of Hannah Arendt, it is through the state that groups are able to affirm their dignity. Thus, this law makes it so whites are the only group locked out and thrown to the periphery. The outcome is obvious. White, middle, and working class people are the only demographic that has seen its life expectancy fall, its suicide rates rise, its employment prospects completely hollowed out through the globalization process that has been brought about by a new metropolitan urban ideology led by a thin film of elite, well, I don't know if I can say it, elite people of a certain religion, and, of course, elite whites as well, who live in these cities, by the way, these power structures where all the jobs and growth are, with an immigrant slave class. White working people and white middle class in London and Paris and New York, in Los Angeles, they are gone, driven out by high rents, driven out by a service economy, driven out by crime, driven out by discrimination from local states. For young middle American men who have few employment prospects and are not given the opportunity for an education, they have two choices: join the Washington Zionist occupation's war machine to kill and die for a plutocratic empire that hates them, or be put on the Sackler family's OxyContin and end up overdosing on heroin. Here, we demand a third alternative: to live. We live in an era of growth without jobs, a crisis of political representation, and a ruling class that sees the people they rule as their enemy. We combine the socialist idea with the national idea, which affirms white dignity and the right to majority rule, which any leftist would support the right of in a non-white country. Today, the Judeo-left has worked tirelessly in its war on white workers. They have ushered in an era of competing nationalisms, all controlled tentacles of Zionism and supremacy of a certain group, while whites are denied even the ability to compete in any kind of collective identity. As Christoph Gilloy says, anti-fascism is the ideology of the rich and powerful. Fascism is seen by the elites as a populist response to the concept of the open society, an idea Wall Street criminals like George Soros have spent billions to export, upon which liberal capitalism is predicated, and those few who benefit preserve their power. While communists may style themselves as anti-fascists, they should remember that one of the arrows of the Iron Front, the symbol of Antifa, represents anti-communism as well. So what really is the difference between liberalism and anti-fascism? Well, that's not so clear, is it? So I hope this debate will bring some clarity to this disagreement.
Thanks so much. We will now kick it over, as I had mentioned, to Brenton for his 5-minute opening statement as well. Brenton, the floor is all yours. Thanks for being here as well.
Topic today is nationalism versus anti-fascism. And though our opponents are not simply nationalists, in a way it is very fitting that it is Caleb and I who are forming an ideological anti-fascist front. Because historically speaking, the first people to recognize fascism for what it is and the first line of defense against it are socialists, of both the Marxist and libertarian varieties. The argument we are currently having is an old one, at least as old as the modern world. And in 2020, we have the benefit of history on our side and can look back at these movements and see exactly where they will invariably lead. This is why Stryker and Enoch will tell you that they are nationalists. And in a certain totally wrong and incredibly deceptive sense, they are at least a little bit correct. Because nationalism, at its core, is poison. Like a poison, it ravaged Europe and Asia, not once, but twice, in less than a century. Nationalism brought about the greatest crime in all of human civilization, the single most horrifying blunder of any culture in all 250,000 years that our species have been on this planet. And when the wars were over and the trials were concluded and the guilty punished, nationalism nearly brought about the end of all life on Earth as we know it in a single nuclear holocaust. And to tell you the truth, it still might. That's still on the table. And yet, my esteemed interlocutors will tell you that they're nationalists. And to many, this will seem a perfectly reasonable and respectable label. Why? Well, because as any good chemist knows, the poison is in the dose. And that right there is their game. How, sir, can you speak such terrible slander of arsenic? Don't you know that arsenic saves lives? It treats leukemia. What do you have against cancer patients, you monster? Now, please, sit there and have the tea that I have lovingly prepared for you. Why aren't you drinking it? Do you love cancer? Now, that's ridiculous. But for the most part, that ridiculous statement is pretty much going to be every argument you're going to hear from them today. Because fascism or third positionism or identitarianism or whatever other idiotic rebrand they come up with in the next week once they realize people have caught on to their grift are all more or less the same. This is because fascism is not a political ideology in the sense of anarchism, liberalism, Marxism, or feudalism. Fascism is a cluster of mostly incoherent beliefs based largely on action over thought, emotion over reason, obsessed with superficial appearances while lacking any substantial philosophical or ideological core. It is the appearance of strength and power, but it is not the thing itself. And it taps into the basest parts of our animal brains and leads its adherents down an incredibly dark and self-destructive road. As we debate, I would like everyone to remember the immortal words of Jean-Paul Sartre. Never believe that anti-Semites are completely unaware of the absurdity of their replies. They know that their remarks are frivolous, open to challenge, but they are amusing themselves, for it is their adversary who is obliged to use words responsibly, since he believes in words. The anti-Semites have the right to play. They even like to play with discourse, for, by giving ridiculous reasons, they discredit the seriousness of their interlocutors. They delight in acting in bad faith, since they do not seek to persuade by sound argument, but to intimidate and disconcert. If you press them too closely, they will abruptly fall silent, loftily indicating by some phrase that the time for argument is past. Now, hopefully, Enoch and Stryker will not fall into this pattern. After all, the only universal constant is change, and the past is the past. But still, some may wonder why I'm even bothering to have this conversation, given all of this, while others may ask what I offer besides criticism, and to them, I'm going to provide one final quote, this one from Daisaku Ikeda. It is the function of evil to divide, to alienate people from each other, and to turn one country against the next. The universe, this world, and our lives are a stage for a ceaseless struggle between hatred and compassion, between the destructive and constructive aspects of life. This is the evil over which we all must triumph. I believe that dialogue holds the key to any lasting solution. Words spoken from the heart have the power to change a person's life. They can even melt the icy walls of mistrust that separate peoples and nations. I am utterly convinced that we were not born into this world to hate and destroy each other. We must strive to make a profound reverence for life and human dignity, the prevailing spirit of our times, for ourselves, for our children, and for our planet. The real struggle of the 21st century will not be between civilizations nor religions. It will be between barbarity and civilization in the truest sense of the word. Sometimes you have to look the devil in the eye. And that's what I'm here today to do.
Thank you very much. We will now kick it over to Mike for his 5-minute opening statement as well. And as I mentioned, it's a flexible opening statement, so the speakers can use whatever they would like from that 5 minutes. So Mike, floor is all yours.
Sure. Thank you very much. As we said, we are here representing the nationalist or third positionist position. My argument is that, one, white people, particularly in America and Europe, we have a right to collective self-organizing on our own behalf. This is a right that has been denied to us effectively by the Civil Rights Act, which is something we have talked about in the past. The Civil Rights Act created a spoils system that is where rights and privileges are divvied out on the basis of racial membership. This is something that this is a game white people are not allowed to play. White people are the majority in the United States. You would think in a democracy, politicians would appeal to a majority, that they would make appeals based on that majority, yet they don't. And not only that, any politician that is even caught, the idea of is being caught. Have you been caught accidentally appealing to white? Is your program that you're suggesting going to benefit white people in any way? This is enough to discredit the politician and make them come crawling to the media, who is owned by our good friends. We know who they are. They will become crawling to them for forgiveness simply for accidentally maybe saying something that might benefit white people. And so this is an intolerable situation for whites. Why must we endure this? Is there some moral reason, some moral or political reasons why we should deprive ourselves of this right of collective self-organizing? It doesn't make any sense, particularly when the very people that will tell you this, that we have some special thing wrong with us, where every time we've done it in the past, it's led to some sort of horrible atrocity. This is the argument. There's no actual argument. Similar to what is labeled fascism, National Socialism. You can call me those words. I'm not going to run from it. But the thing is, what is the argument? There's no argument against the political program. There's no argument against the politics. The argument is overblown atrocity propaganda that was concocted by both the United States and the Soviet Union, which have committed atrocities of their own and have no moral standing on which to accuse others of atrocities. So, you know, the post-war atrocity propaganda that was used to attack the National Socialist regime, one, it's paper thin. It can be argued against, and you can see right through it if you actually apply some reason to some of these claims. Secondly, both of these regimes committed their own atrocities. So they have no moral ground on which to judge another country. I mean, when you hear the United States going out there and talking about the next Hitler, every time the United States government argues for war, what is it? The next Hitler, the next Hitler, the next Hitler. If we can see through these lies today, we'll go back and look through the lies that you got 75 years ago. This is nothing but Victor's justice. And Victor's history, and everybody believes it, including our friends that we're going to debate here. They believe it. And there's no political argument. What is the political argument against an economy and a society based on promoting the health and well-being of a nation, a group of people together, as one? And it doesn't mean hatred of others. It doesn't have to mean hatred of others. There's nothing that implies that. The idea that this is about war. I mean, who, if they support communism or capitalism, is standing on any ground with which to say the other person supports their ideology inevitably leads to war or atrocities or genocides? I mean, that's an absurd thing. We know about the problems that have happened with, we know about issues that have happened with the Soviet Union. I'm not even going to necessarily go overboard with that, because I believe some of that stuff might be lies as well. But we know about the atrocities committed by the United States. We know about atrocities committed by the Soviet Union. So again, who stands in judgment? Who stands in judgment against nationalism, against National Socialism, fascism, whatever you might want to call it, collective self-organization of European peoples? It's, if your ideology allows for collective racial self-organization of other races but not whites, then it's fundamentally unfair. And again, having a group of people organized on their own behalf as a nation does not imply hatred or genocide of any other group. And one wouldn't, the idea that it necessarily leads to that is simply a lie they tell you to get you to run away from the idea of organizing on your own behalf. And that's all that we hear whenever white people raise their heads and try to be politically active in their own behalf. So there we go.
You bet. Thanks so much, Mike. We will now switch it over for the final opening statement. This will be from Caleb. Caleb, thanks for being here. The floor is all yours.
Well, I thought I actually, for my opening statement, might begin by reading from the book of Matthew. This is from the King James Bible. It says, "Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Ye that shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns, of figs, of thistles? Every so good tree brings forth good fruit. But a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. Wherefore, by the fruits ye shall know them." And I think that that's a pretty good introduction to the position that I take, which is that everywhere we have seen the ideas advocated by our opponents here put into practice, we have seen nothing but destruction as a result. Argue what you want about Hitler's intentions, but no one would say that the Second World War turned out well for Germany. No one would say that the Second World War turned out well for Italy. And no one would say that the South, the US South, is the most prosperous and happy part of the United States. If racial segregation, racial division, separatism was the answer, the US South would be an economic paradise. But it's clearly not that, right? If you look at the US South, the place where slavery had its homeland, the place that had Jim Crow segregation, white workers compared to black workers may have lived a little bit better, but compared to white workers throughout the rest of the country, they were suffering, right? That racism hurts all workers. At no point can you point to racial segregation and division as being to the benefit of working people. It is something used by the bosses to divide us. However, there's all this talk about the good old days. People talk about Pittsburgh and Detroit and Cleveland and the once industrial centers of the United States where people worked in factories and had very good wages. Well, why was it that those workers had such good wages? It was because the Communist Party built the CIO, a interracial anti-fascist union. And with the slogan, "Black and white unite and fight," the major industries of the United States were unionized. And it was that struggle, that anti-racist struggle, anti-fascist struggle, that resulted in this standard of living people are now missing. People call it the American dream, but it was largely built by communists organizing on the basis of anti-racism. At the Flint sit-down strike, the 1937 event that people call the Gettysburg of the labor movement, communists organized the workers to seize their factory and demand that those who made automobiles be paid a decent wage. And when they marched out of the plant victorious, they made a point of having the only African-American worker in the plant be the one to carry the American flag, to show that racism was something that they opposed. Meanwhile, it was fascists in the Black Legion, followers of Father Coughlin, who didn't support the striking workers inside the plant, but mobilized to attack them and joined with the police to attack them. Fascists like to tell you that they are anti-capitalist, but if you scratch the surface, you can see that they're always getting support from Henry Ford. They're always getting support from big bankers. They're always being armed and supported by the most wealthy, because in essence, fascism is nothing but an attempt to preserve capitalism. Those of us who understand Marxism and scientific socialism and dialectical materialism understand that when capitalism enters a crisis, when the rate of profit is falling, when workers are being eliminated from the assembly line, when this takes place, there is a big crisis. Products can't be sold. Wages start going down. There's instability in society. So one section of the ruling class will attempt to seize control of the government and utilize the government to carry out mass destruction and political repression in the hopes of holding off the crisis. That's called Bonapartism. It is an attempt to resolve the crisis with mass political repression and save the system. And when that happens, when there are divisions among the ruling class, you'll see the socialist and workers' movement join arm in arm and build a united front to try and beat it back. Fascism is nothing but an attempt to save capitalism. It is an attempt to preserve medieval hierarchies, and it is based on the premise that some people are naturally superior to others, that some races, some nationalities are superior, and that the benefit for all humanity comes from one section of humanity beating down, repressing, and grinding another section of humanity into poverty. Well, I would argue the opposite. I think China is a great example. The reason that China is now the second largest economy in the world is because they kicked out international capitalism by forming an anti-fascist united front. When Mao built the People's Liberation Army that fought off the Japanese invaders, that was not a racist army. That army not only had Han Chinese in it, it had Tibetans, that army had Uyghurs, that army had Mongolians, that army had Koreans. They joined arm in arm. They got support from the Soviet Union. They got support from other countries, and they beat back the genocidal fascist invaders. And it began the process that has now made China the second largest economy in the world. China has gone from being one of the poorest countries on earth to being a global superpower by joining arm in arm, by embracing anti-fascism, by organizing the economy rationally to serve public good, and rejecting this notion that some people should be exalted over others while other people get ground into the dirt. This notion that the way to get salvation for the white working class is by further beating down other people, by engaging in mass incarceration, by escalating the repression of immigrants, by strengthening the police state and allowing further political repression. This is a lie. I believe the hope for all humanity comes by lifting people up, not tearing people down, not trying to restore the past, not glorifying medieval hierarchies, slavery, and primitivism and barbarism. I believe that we should look to the future and not the past. That's my opening statement.
Thank you very much. We will now kick into open discussion. So thanks, gentlemen, and the floor is all yours.
Okay, quickly, just 2 points I'm going to make real quick, and then we can go to the next guy. First of all, Caleb said a lot of things there. He mentioned the Communist Party and the CIO, in the 1930s, Communist Party USA endorsed Hillary Clinton for president in 2016. Okay, so give me a break with the Communist Party.
That's not accurate. They urged people to vote against Donald Trump, but they did not endorse Hillary Clinton.
Oh, in that case,
well,
okay. So
plus, the cliche on the left is that the CPUSA are just edgy
okay.
Democrats.
We're talking about 80 years later. I'm sorry. I mean,
secondly,
that's like you're saying something about Hitler, and I say, well, George Lincoln Rockwell in the 70s said that doesn't prove anything.
So you're not endorsing Hillary Clinton. You're just saying vote for the Democrat against Trump.
What does that have to do with anything?
Fair enough.
What does that have to do with the fact? So them
second thing,
Hillary Clinton 80 years later.
Caleb isn't a member of CPUSA.
The unions weren't built. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying here is that you're talking about an outdated form of the Communist Party that has no bearing on what communists do today, because the communists today are really led largely by the DSA. And I know you don't like Trotsky.
Wait a minute. He talked about China. He didn't say anything about the DSA.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute.
No,
The point is this.
Throw all of leftism.
This guy
Any
says
leftist
this
ever
guy
did
says
it.
fascism is capitalism in crisis. Who did the Lend-Lease support in the war? When the Germans and the Soviets signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and they both invaded Poland around the same
That's
time.
false. That's false.
Who did the British declare war on over the sovereignty of Poland? It was the Germans. They decided
because
between the
Polish
two that the
government in
ones who
exile
get
didn't
punished for
declare
the
war on the
sovereignty
Soviet Union
of
either.
Poland
The Soviet Union
were
was forced to sign the Molotov
Germans.
Ribbentrop
And
Pact.
second of
because
all,
they had gone to
the
all
relationship,
capitalist
the
countries.
idea.
Hang on.
that
What
One
you're
second.
saying,
All right.
what's going on right here is you're taking a very selective reading of history. The fact is that early on, fascist movements had the support of the liberal capitalist class, which is why, for instance, Francisco Franco, even though the United States had officially said they would not get involved in the Spanish Revolution, specifically Texaco fronted Franco with the world's first credit card, where he gave Franco all of the oil that he needed to run his war machine without
After
the United
the
States.
war.
No, before the war, and with no money down. He
The
just gave
Phalangist
him all
movement was openly anti-capitalist. The
Yeah,
arms
it
that
does- yeah,
Franklin
but
Delano
again,
Roosevelt
They
was
can be openly anti-capitalist, but the capitalists, the fact is the capitalists still believe that.
Congress had told Franklin Delano Roosevelt to send arms, for example, to Finland to fight against the Soviets, and he never did it. The same is true for many different people, brigands, basically.
Again,
Jewish
it doesn't matter.
in America who got together to go fight in Spain on behalf of the communists with the full support of the U.S. government.
Oh, no, not the full support of the U.S. government. The U.S. government officially had a position of neutrality in that conflict.
The United States government and the Soviet Union reestablished relations in 1933. It was the son of a Jewish banker named Litvinov, the foreign minister,
Gives a crap who it was.
who met with Henry Morgenthau, another Jewish banker, to reestablish relationships between the so-called most rapacious capitalist power and the worst Stalinist power. So
yeah, it's amazing that when fascism is the enemy, there's some strange bedfellows in war.
So then the capitalists don't support the fascists.
Wait a second, though. Hold on.
The fascists initially, then they realized how evil you people are.
Hold on with me. Just one
bring this
second,
under
guys.
control.
Is
for
we've
a
got
second.
2 or 3 people speaking at the same time. I promise.
Eric
Let's
knows
just
stuff about
take.
World War II, folks. Eric knows stuff about World War II. That proves that communists didn't raise people out of poverty. That's what.
No one's talking about that. No one's talking about that.
Let's
Can I
go back
actually
to this
respond to
original
something
point.
that
What was
Mike had
the,
said, by the way?
original point here. Let's 1 sec. Let's go back to that original point that Brenton was wanting to address. Go ahead, Brenton.
Okay, so this actually goes back to something Mike had said. Now, there were 3 points here. I'm going to do 2 really quickly, and if I have time, I'm going to do number 3. Mike, you asked
Why can't you just do 1, and then we'll trade off?
1? Okay, I'll do 1. So I'll just move straight to my main one here. You said that this isn't about hate, that this is about white people's self-determination, but I'm sorry, that's a lie. You had on your program a man by the name of... Jalen De La Rey is an ex-mercenary, and I assume he's an ex-mercenary in the way that everybody in a small town.
So what? Like somebody, he
came on your program and he said there is no version of segregation that will ever work. Because
I disagree with that position. I
didn't disagree with him on the show.
Well, all right. Well, so what?
You supported him on the show. You said that's tough.
I agree. I agree that segregation is not an ideal position. I actually agree. I don't think
you
should
agree with
have
it for the reason that you
segregation.
have to kill all of the blacks.
I do not accept the characterization that that's what I'm saying. And of course,
that's what he was saying.
Of course, well, he's wrong.
Good. I'm glad you acknowledge that he's wrong.
And that's not the point of this. See, this is exactly.
But why are you going to bring somebody on your show who's an unironic exterminationist? Like, I'm not going to do that on my show. Caleb's not going to do that on his.
Oh, really? So you don't believe in class struggle, where you're going to basically exterminate the bourgeoisie? You don't believe in that?
No, I
don't. First off, class struggle isn't going to exterminate the
bourgeoisie.
bourgeoisie.
Stalin and Mao disagree with you.
I don't advocate murder.
This idea, I want to respond to something else.
It's true we haven't heard much from Mike.
I would kick Stalin and Mao off my program.
We haven't heard much from Mike.
All right. So
let's kick it over to Mike.
The point here is that
gentlemen, work with me.
Guys, kick it over to Mike. Let him respond.
We have not heard much from Mike yet.
The issue here that I keep hearing, this idea that and I've heard this before. I was a communist at one point in my youth. I was interested in Marxism, and I was interested in anarchism. I abandoned that for Marxism, and then I realized that a lot of this stuff is not really well put together. This idea that fascism is the bourgeoisie in crisis, is capitalism is crisis, fascism is called upon to rescue capitalism when it's in crisis, it seems to me ridiculous, because the capitalist and communist powers of the world teamed up together to destroy the one national socialist state that existed.
Yeah,
and this was the fundamental, and this is not the first time. This is not the first time that this has happened. So
Germany
when you have who in reality is the one that is right now, let's talk about right now. Let's talk about right now. Who in reality right now is supported by the police state and the FBI in repressing people, nationalists that want to protest against open borders, want to protest for white workers. What in reality happens? What in reality? What in reality happens right now? Who is actually teaming up with the FBI that is actually have secret connections with the FBI?
Hal Turner
actually
was a white supremacist, and the FBI paid for his program.
Yeah, he was a police informant. He was an FBI informant.
1 second.
Well, they gave him millions of dollars to preach the same
as a
stuff.
police informant.
Well, I'll come right back to you, Caleb.
Guys, moderators talking.
I'll come right back to you, Caleb. Let's let Mike finish up this question, and I promise Caleb will come right back to you.
Hal Turner was an FBI informant. Obviously, when you have a movement that the establishment feels threatened by, they're interested in finding people inside these movements and turning them so that they can spy on people, so that they can get evidence on them, so that they can try and get them pinned down in show trials and things like that. Like, I was involved in a show trial, which fortunately I was able to beat by being, pretty smart about my legal strategy. But the point is that when you actually have today, do you see Antifa? Do you see people self-styled communists or anarchists or whatever they want to call themselves? Who is it that is actually out there supporting the system and supported by the system? These are people who go out and violently attack.
Can you be more specific about that?
For a second? Yeah,
go read
I'll
Vice.
tell you. I will go read any number of media outlets.
I know very well
that are speaking on behalf.
I raided the homes of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. I've seen lots of political repression. This notion.
FBI showed up at my friend Yoni's school.
The Freedom Road Socialist Organization is a tanky group.
I have a friend who is in jail right now for 1 year in upstate New York for Antifa activities.
What did he do? Did he attack somebody?
He was involved in a street fight, and they decided to make an example.
So he
assaulted someone. Okay.
So he assaulted somebody. Okay.
I don't.
So there you go.
I know him very well.
Well,
in fact, I saw at the Invictus debate, he was the guy that one of the Proud Boys tried to attack.
The Proud Boys are in jail for defending themselves from attack. Okay, the Proud Boys essentially were exiting a building when they were attacked by Antifa thugs.
That is a lie.
Masks. No, it's not a lie.
Even Timothy admitted that was a lie.
It's on video.
The fact that these guys lost the fight doesn't mean they didn't start it.
1 second.
They lost the fight.
I don't care about who starts what.
That's what matters when you
you said you wanted to have a real discussion.
Please,
then stop yelling over me, buddy.
All right, the moderator.
Listen.
I don't want to mute people because I feel like you guys are our guests. So the reason we have you on is to hear you guys.
You got to control this one guy because he keeps screaming over people. Like, I don't want to be yelling. I want to make my point, but he gets upset and he can't control himself.
Let's give. We'll kick it back to Mike for a brief. And Mike, just as you yourself had said, we are kind of just 1 point at a time, and then we'll kick it back over to Brenton or Caleb.
Right. So the Proud Boys, in terms of that, they were attacked and ambushed, and they defended themselves. Nobody, I think, should be put in jail for winning a fight that someone else starts. You say, what does it matter who starts it? What matters who starts it is that's how you delegate responsibility in a violent altercation. The person that throws the first punch, person that throws the first rock, the person that throws the first bottle is the one that's morally responsible for the fight. Nobody condemns someone for defending themselves. And if you defend yourself and win, good for you. So no, I take the Proud Boys side in that 100%. I've seen the videos, and I've also been myself involved in street protests where we were out there to engage in our constitutional right to protest, and we were assaulted by people calling themselves Antifa. We didn't start it. Whatever you hear in the media, the media, of course, backs Antifa. They are another arm of Antifa. Antifa,
1 point at a time.
Anti-fascism is the ruling ideology of the United States at the time right now. Now, you might say, that's different. I'm special and I'm a different kind of anti-fascism. But this is the facts.
Okay, let him talk.
Okay, so Caleb or Brenton?
So you asked really quickly. You asked where where the United States comes from, criticizing Germany. That is a tu quoque fallacy. The fact is that even if the United States or anyone else is a hypocrite, that doesn't make them wrong. A doctor who tells you not to smoke, if that doctor smokes, it's still good, sound medical advice. So straight up there, that's just a non-argument. Now, white people, you mentioned this, white people have a right to collective self-organizing. Here's the problem. Race isn't real. Okay. Or rather, it's real in the kind of way money is real. Or in the way that gender is real.
What do you put down on the census?
Pretty freaking real to me, man.
So put down on the census.
Take it to the store and buy products.
Can I finish? Race is a mental tool. It is used by sovereign power as a means of managing populations that it thinks are unmanageable. The whole thing going, it looks at a group of people, says, oh, you people are shady. Everyone like this, like it. So, watch it, buddy. The reason white people are not subjected to this. They do not feel, the state doesn't feel they need to manage us unless we go out. And for instance, like with your groups you mentioned, you were responsible for 100% of the politically motivated violence in 2018, with the exception you were also up there.
I'll respond to that when he's done. So
yeah, thank you. You can respond to that when I'm done. With the exception of sovereign citizens. The fact is that whiteness is not a race. It is a lack of racialization. The government doesn't come up to me and look at me and say, hey, Brent looks shady because he's white. It looks at me and it says, hey, Brent looks shady because he looks like a rudderless hippie. Gotcha. It is completely different when you move on to different groups. And you say like white people can't get together and organize. Caleb and I met at Occupy Wall Street. Bet your ass we got in there and organized.
I do want to
on the basis of white self-determination.
Let me respond.
Not on the basis of white determination, because white isn't a thing.
So then
let me respond.
Let
me talk. Okay, first of all, the idea that white is a social construct, whatever. First of all,
race is a social construct.
Okay, race is a social construct. Well, tell that to all. Tell that. You know what?
To China.
No. Hold on.
I will.
Hold
China,
on.
Race is
Hold on.
construct.
Let me talk. Tell that to the Freedom Road Socialist Party that supports ethno-states for every single race, separate ethno-states. They call it the right to self-determination.
Okay, screw those
blacks,
guys.
Puerto Ricans, I think in Chicanos and fucking Asians and everyone. Okay.
Yeah, I've seen those maps. They're ridiculous.
Yes, that's what the Freedom Road Socialist Party. Your buddy Caleb seems.
Okay, screw the Freedom Road Socialist Party.
Okay, they believe in race. Okay.
Yeah. So Caleb, what do you have?
What I'm saying is that if we live in a country, let's pretend for a second that all science is nonsense. That science isn't real. That genetics aren't real, and that in fact, let's pretend. I'll grant you that for a second, just as a thought experiment. Let's pretend for a second. If everyone else believes that, everyone else of every other race believes that, it's in your interest as a white man to organize on those foundations as well. Because if not, you will be a single solitary figure against a group. So it's a form of collective identity. That's where people get power from. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I want to address the hoax. You always say, we're not liberals, we're radicals, we're radical anti-fascists. We lead the anti-fascists with communism and socialism. Well, bro, you're reading shit from the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is funded by millionaires and billionaires. You're reading statistics collected by the Anti-Defamation League.
No, I'm not.
A group. Well, those are the people.
Where are you
excuse me, friend. Excuse
Daniel
me.
Harper says hi.
Let me finish here, friend. Let me finish. Daniel Harper is also a Warren guy. So you know what? Who cares?
What do you mean a Warren guy? Like he's into Elizabeth Warren?
Yes, he's a rad lib. He's a rad lib.
Yeah, who
so
gives
anyway.
A shit? Okay. That wouldn't have anything to do with
it. Let me just finish my point.
One or two more points, and then
let me just finish my point about the crime statistics. Where the Anti-Defamation League were the ones who came up with the statistics that white nationalists lead in terrorism and killing people, or rather. But you know what? What group were these people in? Were they in the Ku Klux Klan? Were they in the National Socialist Movement? Were they Traditionalist Worker Party, Idea Europa, anything? The only thing they can get is the Charlottesville death of Heather Heyer, which, I'm not going to expect you to grant me. I'm not going to expect you to grant me that it's a gray area. But I will say this. How many people are killed every year in the name of anti-racism? Have you heard about the Molson plant attack where 6 Innocent workers were shot to death by a crazy black man who said he did it because the white people there were racist. He did it in the name of anti-racism. On top of that, when it hit Twitter, the mass media applauded it. Washington Post wrote an article rationalizing it, and people on Twitter were saying, "Oh, maybe he was right to kill those innocent people." There's no evidence.
The very fact that the mass media went behind that is showing me that you're lying about this.
Let's kick
the
it over
Washington
to Caleb.
Post wrote an article rationalizing it.
Yeah, I'll read the article later.
Number of points from Eric. We'll go
Caleb.
over
Can Caleb talk? It's been a while. Or if you want me, I can respond to that, Caleb.
Let me make clear, I have nothing to do with Antifa. I know nothing about Antifa altercations, and I'm not interested in debating that kind of thing.
Ditto.
Brent is free to talk about that if he wants, but that's not my...
I don't have anything to do with Antifa either. I support
him.
As far
as the Second World War, and I know we don't want to debate the Second World War too much, but the issue was that after the First World War, Germany was stripped of its colonies. It had been an imperial power. It had been stripped of its colonies. Under Hitler, the industrial capitalists like Krupp and Tyson, centered around Hjalmar Schacht, a banker, took control of the government. They crushed the communists. They exterminated the labor movement. They outlawed strikes. They put a whole bunch of people in concentration camps. They restarted armaments manufacturing. And then they went about trying to reclaim territory and colonies. And the British let them do it for a long time. Neville Chamberlain, people were very happy. They thought they would get rid of the Soviet Union for them. But they pushed it too far, and they became competitors with the British and the Americans. And at the point that they became competitors with the British and the Americans then teamed up with the Soviet Union. But prior to the signing of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, the Soviet Union had gone to France, it had gone to Germany, not Germany, obviously, it had gone to the United States, to the British, and asked them to form an anti-fascist coalition, and this was denied. Henry Ford was a huge admirer of the Nazis. The National Association of Manufacturers, Henry Morgan, they even attempted a fascist military coup against Roosevelt. You can call it, you read about it, it's called the business plot, right? Because Roosevelt was helping working people and giving them things like Social Security and education and supporting their labor unions. Because of that, strike breakers like the Black Legion, like the Silver Legion of America, like the Ku Klux Klan, you guys claim you support working people, but throughout the history of fascism, fascists are an army of strikebreakers. Every time workers want their rights, the fascists are called up to come and beat the strikers down because they're a bunch of commies. We got to beat them back. They're commies, don't you know? And this is the weird thing. You guys claim to be critical of capitalism. Whether it's Hitler, whether it's Mussolini, whether it's George Lincoln Rockwell, every fascist speech I've ever heard begins with communists are evil, communists need to be exterminated. Hatred for communists, that is central. That is just absolutely central, right? And you look at Libya, right? I mean, Libya was freed from colonialism and broke out of Western capitalism under Gaddafi with the Islamic socialist model. But it was Mussolini who brutally murdered people all across Libya. Omar Mukhtar.
But it was the United States that brutally murdered
Gaddafi.
It was the United States that brutally murdered Gaddafi.
That took money and guns from Gaddafi. So give me a break.
Gaddafi was torn apart by like a mob of his own people.
Hold on one second.
Well,
yeah, but how did that happen?
We're going to let Caleb, let's let Caleb finish up, and then we'll go over Mike.
Like South Africa, like Rhodesia. Right? I mean, you guys aren't anti-globalist. You're not anti-capitalist. You're strike breakers. You're in favor of colonialism and imperialism. Maybe you're with a faction that isn't dominant in it. The British Empire is horrendous. There's no question about it. Winston Churchill was a monster. He's responsible for the death of millions.
And he's your fellow.
10% of the Indian subcontinent to death in a single year.
Pretty soon here, I want to kick it over
the
to
only
Mike. There's a
problem
lot of
Hitler
points,
had
a lot
was
to
that
unpack
he
there.
wasn't as good at it as him. I mean, it was the Germans wanted to do what the British were doing. They were jealous. They wanted to compete.
Gotcha. We'll kick it over to Mike. Thanks so much.
Okay. Well, yeah, I wanted to actually talk about Schacht for a second. It's really funny that you mentioned him because Stryker and I were just talking about him today on our show when we were talking about basically the economic plan that Hitler put in place in 1933. His first 4-year plan. It wasn't a 5-year plan like China does and like the Stalinists did. And in fact, Schacht was I believe he was one of the top bankers in Germany. But Hitler regularly referred to him as a tool of globalist liberalism, and he didn't listen to him. The person that engineered the economic turnaround in Germany, which nobody can deny, actually. No one can deny the economic turnaround between 1933 and 1938 in Germany. And the armaments manufacture actually didn't start up again until around 1938. This was not how they revitalized their economy. A lot of the programs that they did, I could list them off. You would probably agree with them, and I agree with them. And these are the kinds of things I would like to see the United States do today. And I think that these could be done in a very effective way, such as large infrastructure projects, giving people direct money handouts to people in order to buy products, to refurbish their homes, to buy furniture, to buy cars. This was all part of it. And then increased demand, increased production, and it brought Germany back from the brink that they had been, their currency had been destroyed by the, the agreement post-war that the other powers had subjected them to, along with the reparations. I mean, we could go into a long history of this. But Schacht was not the guy that did this. It was, what was his name? Reinhardt. I forget. Was it Fritz Reinhardt? Stryker, tell me, I get that right?
Reinhardt. Yes.
Yeah.
Reinhardt was actually the master of the 4-year plan.
Yes, he was the economic advisor who came up with the first 4-year plan, which managed to shrink German unemployment to something like 400,000 people, from like millions of people to about 400,000 people. Had managed to bring their economy back, had increased production in appliances, autos, furniture, had brought back agriculture, and all of this. So this is the kind of programs that the National Socialists engaged upon in their first 4 years. So you could talk about how like they only did it by bringing the boot down on this or that guy, and it was this brutal capitalism. It wasn't. They didn't. The fact that they were funded by capitalists is simply a lie that the Soviet Union put out there later on. The National Socialist Party was initially funded by contributions from members. And so now you're never going to believe that, so I don't expect you to grant it. But like, it is true. And so the point is that they were not supported by big capital. And in fact, why is it that that the big capitalist powers, like you're not going to find in me any apologist
25
for the British Empire, for Winston Churchill, or for the United States government? I'm not going to. These, in my opinions, are some of the most monstrous governments. I mean, you want to talk about people that gas people there, and Winnie Churchill right there. He's a poison gas man.
Those are the real Antifa.
He wanted to, and that guy, that's the real anti-fascist right there. Those are the real anti-fascists.
Kick it over. That's a good number of points. I'm basically doing like a 3-minute interval. So
all right, let's go.
We got a good rhythm now. So we'll kick it back over to Brenton.
Okay, so first off, you said all this stuff about social programs that we have, and Caleb can go more into that than me, but what I'm going to tell you right off the bat is you can have those social programs without a racial component, and you can have them without stealing from a minority group, which is exactly what they did. But I wanted to actually go back to something that Stryker had brought up, because he said we throw science under the bus. And this comes from a paper, Genetic Similarities Within Human Populations. Oh, boy. Our analysis focuses on the frequency of W with which a pair of random individuals from two different populations is genetically more similar than a pair of individuals randomly selected from a single population.
Richard Lewontin?
No, it says Witherspoon, Wooding, Mancini, Batzer, and Jard. W remains the same, even when using populations as distinct as sub-Saharan Africans and Europeans. Phenotype controlled by a dozen or fewer loci can therefore be expected to show substantial overlap between human populations. This provides empirical justification for caution when using population labels in biomedical settings, with broad implications for personalized medicine, pharmacogenetics, and the meaning of race. Now, what does that mean in simple terms? It means that because of the way genetics functions within human populations, I can have more genetically similar with somebody from sub-Saharan Africa than I do with Caleb or any of you. And the same is true for you guys. The fact is that genetics moves through human population in a bucket chain. It moves like waves underneath the surface. Each group of people breeds with the group next to them. Then that group breeds with the group next to them and the group next to them. And suddenly these genetics travel all over the planet. Furthermore, genetics does not support race because of what we think of as the Toba catastrophe theory. At one point in our history, the Toba volcano exploded. It was a super volcano, and it wound up reducing the population of humans on the planet to some 2,000 or so individuals. All of us come from those 2,000. Humans are one of the least genetically diverse species on the planet. There is almost more genetic diversity in a single flock of pigeons than the entire human species. So there is no genetic basis for race. This is an illusion that is created because it was convenient for the great powers of Europe. And it's starting to no longer be a thing because it is less convenient, and also because we have learned to look beyond our animal natures, and we're continuing to move towards.
So you're saying race is in the
hold
animal
on.
nature.
So
then
that's
race
that
I'm-
contradicts.
We do.
Wait,
let's
that kind
go
of
for-
contradicts.
We'll go for
Let-
just
let me-
let
let me-
me come
let me-
back
go
over to you.
ahead.
We can come
Your
back over to you,
animal
Mike. I
nature,
do want to
right?
just let him finish.
Yeah.
Forgive me for cutting you off, but just to we're gonna let Brenton finish. You got about roughly 60 seconds, Brenton, and then
60
we'll
seconds.
go over to Eric.
Over there. Okay. What I'm going to say is that does not contradict. The battle between compassion and hatred is in each and every one of our hearts. There are savage parts of our nature, and there are beautiful parts of our nature. And racism and grouping people into race is dropping into that lizard brain, that dumb guy rule that goes, that looks different than me no like. When the fact is, we are all so much more similar than like anybody even had an idea. And this is an objective genetic fact. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
After that.
you know, the idea, sure, you can quote a paper of any kind for any reason. The founder, the reason why you're not going to get open debate on race and open affirmation of race by scientists is frankly because the academic structure will shut you down, ruin your life, and make you die as a evildoer.
Well, they do to Watson, right?
If you, well, that's what I was getting at. James Watson, the very person who discovered DNA, the geneticist who discovered it, when he said that race is real and intelligence is part of race, that you can predict intelligence based on race. They took away all of his titles. They took away all of his awards. And the man, his life is ruined. This is an elderly person's life is ruined.
Because he said a bunch of bullshit.
So
you agree with the state, like shitting
you
all over
agree-
scientists
you
and
agree with
ruining
the
his
liberal
life
order
because so then you just agree with the liberal
well,
order
just-
because you think this
Well, let me-
scientist
let me-
broke a
let me-
taboo
let me-
and you should.
Even a stop clock is
Well,
right.
let me
Hold on.
finish here.
necessarily agree with the liberal order, but
Well,
I'm sorry,
well,
I
listen-
interrupted. It's my mistake.
Okay, here's the thing.
Please
Here's the
continue.
thing. Universities, science and the academy are two different things. Okay, because the science, as you guys, I assume, as people that have a class analysis at the very least, will understand that private universities depend on private grants many times from billionaires with their own motives who expect a certain conclusion from science. That's why the Pritzkers, a transvestite, is funding the University of Medicine in Chicago to pretend that trannies that a man can become a woman. And you can laugh all you want, and you can probably cite me 10 studies about how a biological man can be a woman. The problem is we, the people, the majority, know that that's stupid.
There's no such thing as a biological man.
Just like in, yeah, exactly. Just like in
okay,
Caleb's
so-
utopia
Hold
of the
on.
Soviet
I don't
Union.
even think I need
Hold
to
on,
argue
let me
against
fucking
this guy
finish.
now.
Let me
Let's-
fucking
I
finish.
mean, are we just gonna?
Yeah,
have a
you
free
don't
for
want to
all
argue
here?
about
Hold
it
on,
because
one
you
second.
can't.
Just
Please
like
don't
just
make
like
me
in
mute.
Caleb's
Let's Stryker finish.
just like in Caleb's
Trying to play by
Stalinist
the rules
utopia, the Soviet government said that we must prove Lamarckism, which is an attack on Mendelian genetics, that we must stick to this line because it's part of our political ideology. And so this goes back to what me and Mike are saying. Liberalism is the true anti-fascism. Neoliberal capitalism is anti-fascism because that is the one that breaks down collective identities of race, of gender. You think, not for nothing, Brenton, but if you went to the USSR and you went around talking about how men are actually not real and that men can become women, they would put you in a mental institution. So give me a break. No one actually believes in this stuff. This is pure ideological propaganda funded by billionaires who give money to universities that come to these conclusions.
I just want to say one thing about race.
Well, hold on one sec. I just to keep it, because we've got such a good rhythm. Go ahead, Caleb.
Okay. Well, and it's interesting. There claims to be this opposition to the British Empire, but I'm hearing scientific racism, which is something the British Empire widely promoted. I'm hearing, seeing in fascist states colonialism, and that's something the British Empire knew about pretty well. I'm hearing all of this criticism of Winston Churchill, which is great, but I'm seeing people who actually believe in the ideas that he extolled. I mean, this is pretty ridiculous. Now, As far as the point about, when you talk about, I'm hearing, all this scientific racism. That's the latest. I'm hearing attempts to claim that that somehow the Soviet Union were the bad guys in the Second World War. Again, this is what we're hearing from NATO right now, right? This is Timothy Snyder of Yale. That this narrative that Hitler was the good guy in World War II and the evil Russians are the bad ones. That is the narrative being pushed by the European Union. That's the narrative being pushed in Poland, where they're tearing down World War II memorials. You guys are pushing. This is CNN. This is CNN, right? Well, Stalin killed more people than Hitler.
Owned by Jeffrey Zucker.
Are the real bad guys.
We never said that.
Do this.
This is CNN.
I never said that.
Meanwhile, when it gets down to it, you all are Zionists, right? Your whole platform is you want to create a white man's Israel. Well, I'll tell you, Israel, look at the Middle East.
That's
whole
what the Black
thing
Panthers
didn't turn
wanted.
out too well. So I don't think carving out a white man's Israel in the middle of the United States in 2020 is going to work out too well either, right? You guys love racial supremacist states. You love apartheid in South Africa. You love Rhodesia. But somehow you don't like Israel just because you don't like Jews, because you're bigots. That's all it is, right? You guys love the British Empire. You love scientific racism. You believe some people are better than others. You are not anti-capitalist. You believe basically what this system believes in natural hierarchies and all of that, just in a way, way amped up level. That's really the only difference between you guys and the established order. And let me make the point about anti-fascism. You say liberalism is the anti-fascism. Well, the CIA, with the Congress for Cultural Freedom program, with, you talk about Susan Sontag and Theodore Adorno, they funded like crazy all kinds of so-called anti-fascism. And that was to erase the Marxist anti-fascism. They had Operation Gladio to make sure that the communists didn't win the elections in Italy after the Second World War, because the population loved the communists so much because they had been anti-fascist fighters with their partisan brigades, right? That the liberal anti-fascism that you're critiquing was created to prevent people from adopting Marxist anti-fascism. That's really what it's about. Marxists understand fascism in a scientific way, in an economic way. This psychoanalytic thing that, that fascism is the result of a lack of masturbation and sexual freedom or some weird stuff, Wilhelm Reich and all of that. That's not Marxism. They hate Marxism. They have done their best to water it down, to oppose it. And what you're ranting against, what you label Marxism, is not Marxism, right? I mean, we talked about the Soviet Union. There, I'm sorry, but if you compare what people are
the
preaching,
commentator said the German Social Democrats
were fascist. You got to switch it over to
That's ridiculous.
Mike.
I'm sorry, actual Marxism exists.
We got to switch it over to Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, actually, I first of all, I don't actually disagree with you when you're saying that a lot of the Antifa stuff, the sort of liberal, the sort of extreme liberal Antifa that we see now actually was put in place by the governments to freeze out with actual Marx. I agree with that. I think you're right about that. And as someone who has studied Marxism, I don't agree with a lot of it, but I think that it's certainly
that's what your movement preaches. Communist. We need a revolution against communism.
One sec, Caleb. One sec.
Right. It's
Caleb,
communist.
Come on, Caleb, work with me.
Right.
Okay, so go ahead, Mike.
All right. So thank you. Well, first of all, I don't disagree with that. I certainly think that, tankyism or whatever you want to say you are Marxist, like this is certainly better than this sort of liberal, like hyper liberal Antifa that we have now. I think your statements that, the EU is supporting the idea that the Nazis were the good guys in World War II is so completely absurd that I can't even really respond to. I mean, EU, if you go and you say something like that in most EU countries, you run the risk of getting put in jail. If you, it is literally illegal. What's the biggest and most powerful country in the EU? It's Germany. They have a law against anything saying anything good about the Nazis. Literally, if they suspect you're trying to rehab the Nazis, you go to jail. And this is the most powerful country in the EU. So that's an absurd statement. And maybe if there's one academic, I'm not familiar. There's one academic who said this recently in a paper or something. Fine. So this is not like an establishment view that the Nazis were the good guys in World War II. This is an absurd statement, and I can only assume that it's based on some kind of extreme perspective bias on your part. I don't want to accuse you of that, but it seems to me that an objective look at the United States and at the EU would not have you saying that they considered the Nazis to actually have been the good guys. Now, it's true that General Patton thought so, and what happened to him? But he kind of regretted everything that happened later on, and certainly there were some people that went over for the trials and things like that, and they were like, wow, these show trials are really kind of over the top, and this is kind of messed up. But I think that these are absurd statements, this idea. I mean, but let's look at right now. On the race thing, I would say, like, we could argue genetics. Do two white parents have a white baby, and do two black parents have a black baby? If you can show me white parents having a black baby and black parents having a white baby, then maybe I'll believe you until you can show that. I'm not talking about albinos, because that's a specific congenital disorder.
Oh, I see Brenton gonna Google. He's gonna Google.
Right. So what I'm saying,
African couple.
well, whatever. Like, we all know it. And again, you mentioned Israel. Like, go preach to Israel this stuff, because that's, if you're so against it, why isn't Israel like number one on your enemies list? Why are you here talking about totally out of power white men in the United States that are actually trying to fight for some amount of political legitimacy and representation, with the neoliberal order on effectively the same side as the neoliberal order?
Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Going back to Brenton. Let's see.
Hey. Yeah,
sorry. I don't even remember muting you.
I know, it was weird. I was actually telling everybody to listen to Mike. Okay. So, just to respond really quickly, the question that was asked of me is, why am I not more critical of Israel? Anyone that knows me knows that I am very critical of Israel. I have lost friends. I have lost employers because I have been sickened by what the Israelis have done to the Palestinians. And I have
you won't lose employment if you attack white nationalism.
Work with me.
Thank you. All right. So that's the first thing. The second thing, as I said, race is based upon characteristics that are basically skin deep. They do not have a genetic basis. So parents can give birth to children that appear to be more white or whatever. But the thing is that perception, the fact that that is a race as opposed to natural variation within a race. For instance, gingers are not considered a separate race, even though they look incredibly different than the rest of us. That is distinct from actual genetics.
Hold on, ginger rhetoric. I promise we'll come back.
Well, they don't have souls. I have that on good authority. No, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, I've got here, because we brought up gender, I figured it might come up. This is actually from Nature journal. This is the most prominent scientific journal in the Western world. And this is about when Trump was trying to have the basis of determining gender based upon your your sex organs. It has no foundation in science and would undo decades of progress on the understanding of sex, a classification based on internal and external bodily characteristics, and gender, a social construct related to biological differences, but also rooted in culture, societal norms, and individual behavior. So you've got sex. Sex is your biology. It's your dangly bits and everything else, and your chromosomes. Then you have gender. Gender is the part of society that looks at that and goes, this person has dangly bits, therefore they should. That is gender. That is what the idea of what a man is. Man and woman, these are ideals, like platonic ideals that exist along a bimodal spectrum that people of different sexes fit into. Secondly, the genetics that we have shows that actual sex like classification for scientists is actually more complicated than simply male and female. And we know this because nature is a mad scientist, and she doesn't give a crap what humans think about what a person's dangly bits mean. Clownfish, for instance, change sex when there are no females around. It's like, which makes Finding Nemo all kinds of weird. But the fact is that it's not as simple as what we were all taught in school. You have to look at this from a philosophical standpoint and through a lens like that. Don't just fall back on an argument of incredulity, because the fact is that we all
going to Eric.
I don't give a shit.
You don't care about
exactly
the working class.
Exactly right.
You're
Thank you for going back.
We're going to Eric here.
You're a tool of the liberals, and the only people that believe that crap you just spouted are fucking rich Jewish liberals. Those are the only people that believe that nonsense that a man in a tutu is a woman. Okay, you ask a real working person and tell them that stuff, they'll laugh in your face.
Of any race, by the way.
Of any race. Oh no, if it's a black person, they'll probably punch you. So give me a break with that stuff. I mean, it just discredits your argument when you go, oh, race isn't real, but also gender isn't real, and also all these things that are self-evident things that are intuitive, things that human beings have always believed forever that are true.
Exactly. You're dumb.
One sec.
You
You
haven't
got to let him
figured that
finish.
out.
Yeah,
One sec.
exactly. Right. And all you can do to people that realize that you liberals are full of shit is call them names. And that's why leftists can't win elections.
Yeah.
Okay. That's why you get blown out by the lamest conservatives in Europe, the lamest freaking dollar store Donald Trump in Britain swept the British election. And it's not because people like him. It's because people hear people like you and they get freaked the hell out. Okay, because you are only motivated by destruction. You are what Edward Dutton would call a mutant. You are a person who just wants to destroy all forms of collective identity.
Do you feel okay with like being a bad guy from X-Men?
One sec.
Yes.
Brenton,
I mean,
just to let him
where-
finish.
Well, I love the comic book reference here. This is your worldview. This is what encompasses
comic
your
books.
worldview. Oh, comic books, great. Well, who's the bad guy in X-Men was a Jew, by the way. But anyway, on top of that, you know, the idea that, first of all, you call people dumb. Well, there's a lot of dumb people. I don't care if people are dumb. I'll advocate for dumb people. Okay,
Also,
some people are dumb.
My point is
but
that
hold on, let me
something that
finish.
seems
Hold on one
finish
second.
my-
I'm kind of this 3-minute interval. I'm kind of letting Eric and Mike share. So I promise the next 3-minute interval, if you, Brenton and Caleb, if you want to share it, you can. But just to keep it on one side for this part.
Well, let me just say this, that you know look at let's use a Marxist point of view on this. How the only people that believe in this liberal maximalist ideology of sexual liberation, of homosexuality, of every lifestyle is legitimate, let's abolish the family, which, by the way, Engels believed as well. These things don't make the world a better place. Okay, you know, it's been studied actually that one of the number one predictors of a person who will be successful in life is a strong family. Okay, and you people on the left, all you do is attack the traditional family. You want to abolish the traditional family. And the reason for that is that because many of you are in the bourgeoisie, you have strong families, you have privileges, economic privileges, connections, rich parents,
About 10
whatever,
seconds.
things that we working men, we don't have that. So we need our families, we need our race, and we need our nation. That's the difference between us. It doesn't matter what some pseudoscience from Nature magazine, which says all kinds of crap.
Switch it over to Caleb.
Okay,
I think we got that last point, and then we're going to switch over to Caleb. And like I said, if you guys want to split it whatever way you want, you can. And this is probably, I'm trying to remember how we started with these intervals. At one point, if one side is willing to yield to the other, otherwise I'll flip a coin in terms of who will go last before we go into the Q&A. Although, if I remember right, we do have closings of which you guys can basically choose how much of your 5-minute closing you'll use. And so maybe I think that we did start when we did this interval thing. Caleb, I think, was the last person on the first round. So maybe what we'll do is we'll go Caleb for this 3 minutes, and then we'll go into the closing statements, starting with Mike, then going Brenton.
Well,
Eric,
I would like to have the last word in the
We're
closing because Caleb got the last word on the opening.
Yeah.
Either Stryker or myself.
Well, wait, Stryker got the first word though.
Right. Oh, okay. All right. So, okay, that's fine. I just want but
you want it to be fair. It's cool. We'll make sure it's fair. You said me and Caleb can take this really quickly because it would actually be
right for 3 minutes before we start.
Really quickly, I just want to add off. So Stryker, I'm wondering if you work in I'm really wondering if you work in a movie theater because that was some epic levels of projection. The idea that me and Caleb are like representatives of the bourgeoisie, dude. We were both on the ground at Occupy Wall Street. I was kneed in the spine by a. Who was?
I was at Occupy Wall Street.
Okay.
There was like 1,000 people there.
I was kneed in the spine by a cop and thrown through a line of motorcycles. Both of us bonded over covering the Cecily McMillan trial. We have seen the way that the state treats radicals. I saw it myself when like Bloomberg ordered the like he made an agreement with the editor of the New York Times that he would take his side before he cleared Zuccotti Park, and they deployed freaking police helicopters to prevent coverage from the air and to prevent journalists like Caleb from covering it from the ground. So don't tell us that we're not working class or whatever. Also,
Bloomberg and
I'm
the other
married
New
with a
York Times,
child.
huh?
Caleb is married. Neither one of us are attacking the family. Like I'm hearing some pain. And I don't mean that in a obviously you got some family issues, and that's okay. A lot of people do. But like the thing
why are you
is,
psychoanalyzing me?
What I'm
not
saying
true at
is,
all.
what I'm saying is, don't
I'm trying to be
project
polite, but
that
I
onto
feel
us.
like-
Don't assume that that these liberals that you've talked to, that these other places are making arguments that we're not. Don't put words in our mouth. That's what I want to say. No,
said
sorry,
was that
Caleb,
the
go.
only people that believe in
Let's go back
transgenderism
to
are liberals,
Caleb.
and you're one of
Let's
them.
go back to Caleb.
All right.
Well,
It doesn't
we've
matter
got-
if you believe in it or not. It's
I'm
a
trying to remember.
fact.
We've got
No,
like
it's
maybe
not.
Caleb, if you want to make I think we have enough for you to make like a single quick point. Otherwise, we'll go to closing statements.
Well, I think I'll just explain, I guess, first of all, I want to respond, I guess, to what Mike said earlier, because this narrative that the Soviet Union was not heroic in fighting fascism is being pushed widely by the establishment right now. From Harvard, from Yale. I mean, go to the bookstore. You'll find loads of books trying to say that the Soviets were worse than the Nazis. The Soviet anti-fascism was not heroic. They're tearing down World War II memorials right now. People are being threatened for honoring anti-fascist resistance fighters all over Eastern Europe. And I will add that after the Second World War, the United States embraced people who talk like you all over the world. They reinstalled the Shah of Iran, a brutal dictator who actually referred to his people as Aryans and had been.
Why are you characterizing me? I don't support the Shah at all. I'm very pro
Ukraine.
We're
Ukraine,
gonna
the
let
government
Caleb
that's
really
installed
quick.
there agrees with your narrative of World War II. You guys have the NATO, European Union narrative of World War II, that the Russians were the main bad guys. And that's just a fact. Okay, I'm sorry. Look at anything about Russia. Look at anything about World War II history being pushed by the American establishment. You get this message that the Soviets were the main bad guys. That's
to keep the times totally equal. I'm so sorry to interrupt, Caleb, but just to be fair, I think with that single point, we'll move into the closings. And so thanks so much for your patience, fellows. It's been a wild one. We will kick it over to Mike for the first closing statement. Do I understand right? You had a concern. I think that.
Well, no, one of them goes first so that we can have the last closing statement.
Okay, I'm trying to remember because generally the advantage goes to the very first statement and then the very last statement. And so I'm trying to remember who started. I think you're right.
Striker.
Okay, so what? I go? Okay.
So no, wait, hold on. The opening statements went Stryker, Brenton, me, Caleb. So let's do it in reverse. But I want one of us to have the last statement is what I'm saying, because they got the last opening statement. So started with one of them too.
I think that the advantage, though, generally, like, I mean, and there's even like empirical data on psychology, like the very first thing and the very last thing are the most memorable. So like, I think the advantage is usually like the very first 5 minute or whatever, however long statement, and then the very last statement.
I feel like Caleb should end it.
Yeah, of course, you would feel like that.
But well, no, because I stepped all over him in the 3 minute thing. But you guys did get the first statement of the debate. One of us should get the last statement of the debate. And I would say that should be Caleb, not me, because I stepped all over Caleb earlier.
Let Caleb do it. He's just gonna repeat Comintern stuff from the 30s. Like it's not like it
be a dick.
Okay, so we'll go over to what we might as well, I think, keep the order then that we were going. So if we want to start with Mike, then go over to Brenton, then Eric, and then Caleb, and these will just be the last statements before Q&A.
So who's going?
Mike. So we'll start with Mike, and this is as long or as short as you'd like it to be, but as long as it's not over 5 minutes.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I think we've heard a lot of stuff, a lot of accusations hurled at Stryker and I, a lot of characterizations that we don't necessarily support, of course, in this format. Sometimes maybe you guys don't know or you don't understand some of the more nuanced points of what we talk about. Accusing us of being fans of the British Empire, that to me is just ridiculous.
Yeah. Listen to Stryker Mike sometime.
Yeah, I mean, just actually listen to our show. You might be surprised at the kinds of things that we talk about. The idea that perhaps some people are critical. There might be some intellectuals like critical of the Soviet Union or something, but generally speaking, is it against the law to have said that Germany should have been crushed? No, but it is against the law to in any way attempt to rehabilitate Germany in Europe. I mean that's the facts. And in America, it's not against the law. Like you won't go to jail, but you might lose your career, you might lose your social standing, etc. And that is another form of social control. and you're never going to lose any of that for supporting, frankly, any of the positions that you guys support. Similarly, you could talk this gender stuff. It's absurd. Like there's no even point responding to it. Like that is stuff that is not stuff that has anything to do with any kind of worker struggle. I mean, even if you're talking about a worker, this is just like crap that is thrown in there to confuse people and alienate them. It's not relevant to anything. Like I said, with the racial stuff, obviously white is a category because people are classed as such. So you talk about racialization or non-racialization. Let's say I even buy into your idea that that there's no genetic basis. I mean, I don't like arguing genetic stuff because it can get extremely detailed, and a lot of times people don't know what the hell they're talking about. So I don't pretend to. What I know is I'm white, and other people that look like me are white, and we are denied political rights based on this classification. Others that don't have this classification are granted them. So I have an interest in organizing with people of my same race to fight for that. That's it. I mean, you can just continue to try and back up that disenfranchisement by telling fables of people that did this before and did bad things. But that's really, it's not convincing to somebody who today, right now, is denied the right to advocacy and advancement because of their race. And the fact is, like,
class
this kind
is also
of
a social construct.
Right. Well,
class is a social construct.
Striker,
Yeah,
you're going to
class is a
get
social
to
construct.
go. You're going to get to go, Striker. Yes. Yeah. So this is the point. Like, dealing in all of a sudden something being a social construct only when it comes to race does this argument even come in. And I'm supposed to like respect some science which I feel is deliberately constructed to disenfranchise me, and I'm not going to accept that. Why is it in my interest? Like I said, you can talk about these things, science, and throw papers around, but this is not working class. There's nothing in this that is fighting for workers or for their rights or anything like that. This is just some kind of intellectual superstructure that is meant to confuse people. And of course, the idea that this is not possible is ridiculous. So we are here saying white men, and people know that they're white. The government takes a census, asks you what your race is, that you can say, oh, the government is exactly the one that's creating this, but everyone has always believed in this. So if they're divvying out rights and privileges based on this, then it's in my interest to understand that and to act upon it. Like, I'm still white when I apply to college. I'm still white when I apply to a job, and I'm still going to be the last on the heap of the applications because of that. So it doesn't matter that you have some scientific argument as to you don't say that to Black Panthers. Go and tell that to them. You won't, because you class them as oppressed, which again, there you go. That's another exact part of the same intellectual superstructure I'm talking about. So there's that. Now, when it comes to, I didn't hear anybody debating, what I'm interested in, which is like, I talked about the programs that were actually enacted in National Socialist Germany between 1933 and 1938, which I don't think anybody on this call would disagree with any of that. That rehabilitated that nation. Now you could say, oh, it was based on race. Germany was a German country. Why shouldn't the government of Germany protect and support the rights of Germans? I mean, you're not going to get rid of all political borders. This is an absurd idea and it's only brought up. Like, China is China, right? People in China are Chinese. Sure, there's like 8% minority populations of this or that, but they're not letting white people to the top of their Politburo. They're not doing that. And they would not, this would not be something that they would even consider. So only in Western white countries are these type of arguments brought forth to prevent the white population of these countries from political self-organization and self-actualization. And this is the point. You talk about immigrants. Well, one of the biggest ways the capitalists oppress workers is through the destruction of wages by the importation of immigrants, who then become sort of a de facto slave class because they don't. Because they don't have the same kind of rights. And so this is an attack on workers, immigration itself. And if you like democracy, if you have an idea that the people should get what they want out of the state, then you have to understand white Americans have for years wanted a number of things that they have never gotten. And one of those is immigration control. Other things are things like supporting strong families. And these are things that are mocked and ridiculed, not just by the liberal establishment, but by people like you.
All right. This is a good point to close. I'll give you guys, sorry, I let Mike go over a little extra just because I didn't give you a warning in terms of like what I'll do for you guys is if you want to just peek at me in the Zoom window, I'll put up a finger to let you know if you've got 2 minutes left, 1 minute left. And next up, Brenton, the floor is all yours.
Absolutely. So to begin, Germany was German. That is begging the question. The nation state that was Germany was literally created by warfare, as is every nation state that has ever existed. These political divisions that seem to be really, really important, political, cultural divisions, these are only creations of the past few hundred years, maybe a few thousand. You said that race, you look in the mirror, you see yourself as white. Yeah, so do I. But guess what? Back during Rome, there wasn't white and black. Like, there were people who were white and people who were black, but there were only two races to the Romans. There were Romans and barbarians, and that's it. Because again, what can happen is people can have social constructs and subjective things can seem very, very real and very solid. And you have to actually take the time to delve into the philosophy and see beyond what is obvious. Because again, it's the whole thing like with Plato's cave, with the person sits in the cave and just sees the shadows moving on the wall, and then a guy escapes, goes out and sees the real world, comes back and tells everyone about the real world. They will react exactly like you. No, I know what the real world is. It's these shadows on the wall. Shut up, you weirdo. So that's the first part. But you know what? Here's the thing. I've been pretty aggressive during this debate, and I've done it for a number of reasons, particularly because there were a number of lies. But here's the deal. I do want to identify with you a little bit, because I do believe you when you say you want to organize for your interests. And the thing is, you can do that. Again, we had Occupy Wall Street. That was exactly what Caleb and I was doing, and it didn't have a racial component to it. The fact is that when you bring in the racial component, when you try to organize around that fiction, what happens is you alienate a huge number of people. And then second, what happens is that because race is not a real thing, it falls prey to this vicious circle where fewer and fewer people are actually considered part of whatever race that you're going to do. And this happens everywhere around the country and around the world. And it has happened every time people have tried to organize around these principles in human history. The thing is that if you want to organize, what you need to do is you need to reach out to people on the basis of their humanity. You need to come from a place of compassion, and you need to not get sidetracked by all this other stuff. Like, for instance, you said that you feel like you have less of a chance of getting into a university because there's some affirmative action. The thing is, that's not even statistically sound. What's happening is, say there's 100 positions in a university that could go to anyone. And before segregation, a lot of those 100 positions all went to white people. I'm sorry, not segregation, before affirmative action. Then they said, okay, we're having a problem because everybody is just giving these positions to white people. Let's make sure that 30 of these 70, they can go to people with minorities. You are still competing against 70 white people. Those you haven't lost any of those things.
10% are white Gentiles, by the way, at Ivy League schools.
It doesn't matter.
10% white Gentile men.
Hey. Let me have my.
So then we'd only have what, like 2-3% Jews.
We do have to. It's his closing statement.
Yeah. So I said at the beginning of this that there were going to be a lot of bad faith arguments and that there were going to be a lot of lies, because again, fascism is internally incoherent. It is a feeling. And you know what? It's fine. I'm one of the more emotional people out there. It's okay to have feelings, but you can't let those feelings lead you to get into a position where you are ignoring material facts of reality. And you also can't let that mislead you into a point where you're hating on other people in your society to the point where you've got a guy on your show who's talking about unironic exterminationism. This is evil. In the truest sense of the word. Is that 1 minute? Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is evil in the truest sense of the word. This is the barbarism that Daisaku Ikeda was talking about. Now, what I can say from my experience, both with Occupy Wall Street and with my Buddhist organization, Soka Gakkai, where white people are actually a minority in this organization, because it is a Japanese Buddhist organization. The thing is, we had 50,000 youth linked up across the country of all different colors, genders, ethnicities, whatever, and we were all united together. These enemies that you are looking at, they're shadows. And you've got to see past that to the actual reality. And when you do, and I guarantee you, when you come from a place of compassion, and when you do actually do the scary thing and reach out to the weird people who talk funny, you're going to find that you've got more in common than you probably thought. And you're going to find that your life is going to improve because you are no longer coming from a place of fear.
Time. Next, we'll switch over to Eric. So, Eric, the floor is all yours.
So I don't even care if it's a feeling, because we are romantics and we are idealists. That's why we hate Marxism. So we don't believe.
Please define idealism. Philosophical
idealism. Okay. Let me get to my point. The point is that you can talk. I did in the Marxist context, for example, you could say that racism is a form of idealism, right? That's how a Marxist would see racism. It's not actually
what idealism is.
Okay, but I'm talking from a Marxist perspective. But here's the thing:
that's not from a Marxist perspective.
Wait, Marxist believes that a Marxist believes that racism. A Marxist believes that race is an idea, and so discriminating against people is based on race is a form of idealism. That's what Marx contributed. I'm sure, possibly Caleb, if he's going to be honest, would agree with me that racism itself is not a product of class development or the means of production. It's an idea that you guys say is to divide the working class, but it's whatever. That I don't agree. So what I would say is this: you guys say race, gender, all these things. Well, class we know is a social construct, but race and gender, according to you, is a social construct. Fine. If you think that, fine. The thing is, you guys on the Judeo left don't actually mind identitarian organizing based on gender or on even people, even a man who wants to fuck another man up the ass has a right to a collective political identity, according to you. That is somehow a class that has a right to a political collective identity to advocate
because
for
the cops were kicking their ass for doing that.
And you know what? The cops, you can find a picture of me fighting with the cops.
We've had the cops come after us.
I was personally, you know what's funny, Brenton? You know what? I can tell that you're possibly a person who believes this stuff. And that's, I respect sincere people of any political stripe.
Thank you.
I do. But here's the thing. When I went out to protest, I was surrounded by cops and leftist scum, and they attacked me together. Okay, yep. That was my experience, and the experience of 1,500 people.
Really? Because I have a friend who was attacked at that exact same event by Identity Europa, and the cops stood aside.
They're lying.
Well, they're lying.
They're not lying.
I know Identity Europa, and they don't fight people. So anyway.
Bullshit.
The idea that Identity Europa fights people is ridiculous.
Is a laughable thing. We know. Trust me, we know. But anyway, the point is that if you guys even, I'd love to see you or Caleb take your race is only a social construct to a black identitarian group. I'd love to see you do that. You know what would happen to you? And you know this full well, is that you would be lynched by your comrades for it. So why is it
it's
that
funny because I have done that.
Only tell white workers and white people that are disenfranchised in this country that their identity is a social construct and thus illegitimate as a foundation for political organizing? How is it any more illegitimate than organizing based on your class, which is a social construct? All of these, in our worldview, we are oppressed because of our race, and this is actually brought about by many different policies. We can get into them, but we don't have time. The point I'm making is that, even if I don't want to get into a debate about haplogroups and stall science and all that stuff, race is to an extent. It is a combination of genetics, of science, and soul. Okay, it's both. It's both things. And the thing I'm getting at here is that whatever your assertion is that it's not real is irrelevant, because you say gender isn't real, and you would support feminism, I assume, right? You support feminism, yeah?
Well, am I not muted? I support feminism in the sense that it is a critique of patriarchy, and I am an anarchist, so I support the critique of any kind of illegitimate hierarchy.
Right.
1 minute left.
But you also believe that gender is a social construct. So you do believe that political organizing based on
social constructs are still important. And the thing is that
there we go. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I wanted. That's all I wanted from you. Okay. So,
look, dude, if you want to have a real conversation about this sometime, we can have a real conversation, but it has to be in good faith.
I'm totally willing to do that.
The thing is, the bad faith is not really coming so much from you to an well, somewhat, but the bad faith is like, before I have to go, it's Caleb, like his like ridiculous like dinosaur Soviet definition of fascism, which is a load of horse shit, where the Soviets would call the Social Democratic Party of Weimar Germany fascists, and then he goes around calling Pinochet a neoliberal, calls him a fascist. I mean, this is
he's pretty much a fascist.
We are anti-Pinochet.
Love their helicopter.
And we're running out of time.
Yes, those are libertarians that like these rabid libertarians.
We're going to switch it over to Caleb for the final closing. Then we'll go into Q&A. So thanks so much, Caleb. The floor is all yours.
I must say, I'm one of the few leftists that will do these kind of debates. And I will say this has got to be the worst debate I have ever had. This is a complete clusterfuck. And I almost feel like this was a complete waste of my time. This is not an encouragement for me to ever have a debate like this again. I probably will, but tonight, I don't feel like anything really productive was discussed. August Bebel, he very famously said that anti-Semitism is socialism for fools. Right? Some people.
What about anti-whiteism?
I'm sorry, may I finish?
Anti-whiteism.
Hold on, we got to let him finish his statement.
That
no, you won't.
Some people are not capable of understanding capitalism and economics and class struggle, and they think purely in racial terms. I'm in this group, and we're being treated unfairly. There's this other group, and they got it better than my group. I mean, this is typical. Right. And it's sad. It's one of the curses of the working class as people are struggling to survive. I've heard this from every community I've ever been part of. And, they think that their group suffers the most and the other group doesn't suffer as much. And they wish the cops would go beat them up more and be nicer to them. And they wish they got paid more in the other race that has it too good. This is just sad when people are fighting for crumbs. This is what they're reduced to. And I also think it's kind of sad that so much of this debate has basically revolved around who's more persecuted, right? Are the government's harder on me? No, the government's harder on me. I know the government's harder on me, as if that's an argument for us being correct, right? I mean, and I do think the government is harder on genuine leftists and anti-imperialists around the world, but the fact that that's even the terms on which we're debating is kind of sad. I mean, is it not? And I also want to add that, earlier in the debate, it was said, quote, white males are fighting for representation in the United States. I mean, I'm sorry, but I mean, is it even worth talking to somebody who thinks that that's a legitimate statement that white males are not represented in the U.S. system? I mean, that's ridiculous. But white people are suffering in the United States right now. No question about it. There's a lot of low-income white people that are suffering. There's a lot of white working class people, a lot of young working class people who are suffering. And to those folks, they need to look into American history. Because every time things have gotten better for white workers, it has been because they've been in alliance with black workers, whether that was in the 1930s when, they were fighting for union representation and social democracy and benefits and social security and union representation. And fascists tried to overthrow
your background picture is hilarious.
On strike.
I think that's what Jim's doing right now.
About the 1960s, the struggles that went on then. I mean, it has always been.
Man, we're going to go live and just call out Jim because
would be upheld.
I think he's a no-show, but he's honestly, he is known as really unreliable.
Why would you support an institution?
I think he's got
white workers off to die.
I don't know. I think he gets what's that word? Cold feet really soon before a debate, and just like decides to just not show up or something.
The way white workers have gained is by supporting black workers. Right? If black and white unite and fight has always been the basis of advancing white workers. Segregation, racism has always been bad for the white workers.
Yes, praise.
No question about it.
Oh yeah, it's been. You know what? Tomorrow night's going to be great because I've confirmed with both
immigration.
Neff and
there is a problem with mass
geologists.
Migration, and the immigrants are the first to tell you that.
This will be the last time I try and set up a debate
They're coming
with Jim.
here because
I'll say that live. He's way too
driving wages down all over the world.
Unorganized.
And let me add, though, that when I hear alt-right people talk, they don't have a real solution.
But did you send it to John?
MS-13 ever had. Making immigrant communities afraid to call the police.
Send it to John. I emailed Mark Drysdale and he was right, but I don't know if they're going to respond in time. But we'll go live for a few minutes and just if Jim doesn't show up.
And as a result, they were not getting tested for coronavirus. You guys don't really want to solve problems. You just want to get a cathartic revenge. You're all about punishment. You're all about repression. It satisfies this desire you have, your pent-up rage, but you don't really want to solve problems. you enjoy some kind of cathartic, you read Mussolini's writings. He's all about this, right? It's not about actually solving problems. It's not about actually improving things. A lot of people are suffering, but racial separatism is not going to get us out of the crisis we're in the United States right now. I mean, if you look at it, why are so many people in the United States locked up? Why do we have mass incarceration? Because of racism, demonizing African Americans, arguing, the scare, the black community, gangs.
You still cross the street when you see a group of blacks.
Why are being taken away in the United States right now? Because guys like you say the police are always right. He deserved it. He deserved to get killed. Police brutality is made up to oppress white cops.
Hey, let him finish his thing.
And racism is hurting everyone. The reason our rights are being taken away, the reason our jobs are being taken away is because of this ideology, because there is no class solidarity. Black and white unite and fight. That's how we've always gained everything in this country. And that's the only way we're going to get out of this mess.
One sec. I'm going to give, just because I think the last 2 minutes or so, for some reason, we had some sort of malfunction where our producer Praise somehow started talking into the stream.
Yeah, that was messed up.
What the heck, Praise? Let me figure out what's going on with that. But we'll give you 2 minutes, Caleb. I'm honestly so sorry about this. I promise his punishment will be swift and severe, but we can give you 2 minutes if you had anything extra.
When was I interrupted? What was I?
It was just the last 2 minutes or so where not even 2 minutes.
It wasn't for 2 minutes. It was like
it was a very
15
brief
seconds.
moment.
Yeah.
You got a little interrupted.
I will just reiterate my point that if we are going to get out of this crisis and if people are going to improve things, the idea that we're going to set up some kind of white man's Israel in the middle of middle America, forcibly deport all the minorities, set up some kind of police state there and make sure none of them are hiding and start trying to glorify Hitler. Let me add this, you know what I mean? The term neo-Nazi, right? I mean, I'm a socialist, communist, whatever. I'm not a neo-communist. I'm not a neo-socialist. I'm not why is it neo-Nazi, right? One can be right.
We didn't invent that term.
But
that's a term of abuse.
That's a term you guys invented.
Glorifying Hitler in the year 2020 is mental illness. It's really mental illness. I don't know what's
Mr.
going on,
Stalinist.
but if you think
Caleb's not a Stalinist.
Let's let Caleb finish, and then I promise we'll go into Q&A.
I thought we could be objective. I thought we could be objective about history, right? No. Now we're mentally ill for trying to be objective about it.
Listen to the science, Mike. The science of Marxism.
I mean, you look at the alt-right guys and their silly costumes and all of that. I mean, you guys need some help. I feel sorry for you, and I really hope
we've got to go into Q&A.
Can I jump in really quick?
I'm sorry, Brenton. Just to keep it fair, I got to say no. We got to go into Q&A. Okay, thanks for.
I was going to be nice to those two, but okay.
Okay, well. We're gonna kind of fly through these. Sean Pickle, thanks for your super chat. Didn't see anything written, but appreciate the support. Steven Steen, thanks for your super chat, who said type 14 in the chat if you are a Jamesasexual. Okay, thanks for that.
14.
Lou Duva, thanks for your super chat, who said the rightstuff.biz is the best site on the internet. So I think you've got a fan for let's see the team nationalism. Fans. Vincent B, thanks for your super chat, who said sticker please just speak, or I think they are maybe saying Stryker please just speak normally.
Can we call Stryker sticker from now on?
I think we're gonna have to. Pana Saves, thanks for your super chat, who said would like to understand how Black Bloc and anarchist anti-capitalism went from pro-nationalism to open borders in the last 10 years.
Can I respond to that? Because I'm the anarchist here, and Caleb, sure. We both saw what happens with Black Bloc. First, Black Bloc is a tactic. It is not a group. So it's just a tactic that certain anarchists use at certain times, usually when they're going to do illegal stuff, smash some windows or whatever. Antifa, which is often confused with Black Bloc because Antifa uses Black Bloc tactics, has been around in the United States and active since the 80s at least, and probably before that, and longer in Europe. The only reason people think they're suddenly coming out of the woodwork and being anti-nationalist or doing all this is just because a lot of fascists got invited into the mainstream, and then the kind of Republican media machine through Fox News kind of assumes that Antifa is the paramilitary group of the liberals. Liberals hate Antifa. Nancy Pelosi despises them and has said
horrible
things about them.
What about Chris Cuomo?
Just so we don't get too tangled up.
Chris Cuomo is a TV personality. He's not
a liberal,
politician.
and he loves Antifa. What about Don Lemon? He praised Antifa.
Yeah, I would say I'm talking liberals overall, like the liberals that are actually in power and actually matter.
Which liberal in the last 2 years?
Just because, forgive me, I hate doing this, but just because we have a lot of audience questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, keep going.
Decepticons Forever, thanks for your super chat, who said, be nice, he's wearing a helmet. Gotcha. Robin. So a lot of these are trolls. There are a lot of trolls here.
Yeah.
Robin.
I shouldn't have laughed at that.
Ule Nav, thanks for your super chat, said, as a Nat Soch, I got nothing against Bernie bros. I used to be one, but the problem is that the establishment and both parties do not care about white workers and want to replace them with immigrants.
Bernie cares about white workers.
Well, let me address one. Yes,
sorry.
that's absolutely true. Bernie Sanders lost a lot of his white supporters, working class and rural white supporters, because he went off the rails on guns. Remember, he got a lot of his policies in 2020 from the Democratic Socialists of America, which, I hope you guys would agree is probably a liberal group. They support.
What do guns have to do with workers?
Having a gun?
Yeah, what does it have to do with workers? Like with their material class?
If you're a socialist, if you're a communist,
if you're a Marxist, you should actually
I'm aware of that, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about within worker struggle in a capitalist society where there's not an actual armed revolution taking place. Like,
how do you overthrow?
Okay,
listen. Okay, fine. The point I'm getting at is that the DSA pushed for Bernie to take up they're for abolishing the Second Amendment. It's on the DSA site. They're for open borders, not legalizing immigrants, not bringing more immigrants, totally open borders, which is insane.
I mean, it's insane. We've got a totally open border between like Virginia and West Virginia.
Okay.
Did Virginia run across the border and attack them?
That. But the thing is, like, whatever you
the border between Virginia and West Virginia is a product of the Civil War. But
yeah, it is. But again, they
did actually cross that border.
We have, I don't know if West Virginia attacked, but the fact is that we have open borders between our states, and it works fine.
Yes.
Like
so citizenship has no value to you.
Gotta wrap this up.
I mean, I don't like nation states in general, but what I will say is look up a book. It's called look up a book. It's called The 11 Nations of America.
Okay,
gotcha. Eric, if you have a quick rebuttal, since the super chat was
just quickly.
Kind of directed at you,
yes. Anyway, the left is not interested in representing the working class. Maybe some like splinter Workers' World Party group Caleb's in is, but they're not represented. They're not representative of the working class. The left today is a bunch of hipsters.
Praise, man. I had me dying of laughter, but I was telling my wife, I'm like, thank God we didn't.
You're talking about liberals.
Can they hear me again?
Okay, we're going to go to the next one.
I don't know with you now.
DSA is the left.
Praise, you there?
Thanks for your super chat. Hey, too. Gotta go to the next one. Stryker
Let's
says,
see if you can hear me.
Stryker supports throwing ethnic minorities such as Kazakhs in re-education camps to get them to conform to the Han majority. How can he defend such a thing?
You know what? I'm going to let Caleb take that. He said, I saw that question before. He said Stryker supports putting Uyghurs and Kazakhs in China in gulags, which isn't happening. It's not actually happening. That's a lie. And by the way, I wrote an article that about China and stuff and why the liberal powers want to, which I would recommend Caleb would read if he just opens his mind a little bit. I agree with Caleb on most foreign policy things. Caleb is good on Syria. He's good on Iran. He's good on Venezuela. He's good on China. So I agree with him to a point. I'm not going to like totally advocate for the Chinese system completely, but I do agree they have good economic system that should be studied and is interesting. Point I'm saying, though, is that I don't support putting them in camps, but what I do support is that if a Uyghur member of ISIS goes out and he kills a bunch of little girls with a knife in Beijing, which has happened in other cities, yes, someone like that should be in prison. And you know what? Everyone who helped them should be in prison. I don't think that's controversial, but you know what? I'll let Caleb answer that since he knows a lot about that. Go ahead, Caleb.
Well, actually, I don't know a lot about it. I think we don't have enough information. And I think that what's interesting is, Eric, you seem to be a critic of U.S. foreign policy. But right now, the hostility to China that's being pushed, I mean, we saw Donald Trump just cut off U.S. support for the World Health Organization.
I don't support Trump. I don't
pushing
support
a conspiracy theory. I know you don't support Trump. I'm talking about Trump, but not you. The World Health Organization, they just cut off their support based on this conspiracy theory that how somehow China is involved in the coronavirus and is trying to infect us all. The opposition to China coming from the Republican Party right now is based on racism. These people who speak a different language and look different than us, they're not white people like you. And the sentiments that your movement is based on are being used to push hostility to China. You can say you disagree with it all day long, but racism is bad for anyone who wants peace in the world.
Jingo, I'll tell you what, jingoism. Right? I'll give you something. I'll grant you something really quickly. I'll grant you something. Jingoism. Hey,
they portray Assad. He's an
hang on. He's trying to say something, Caleb.
I'm trying to agree with you. I'm trying to agree with you.
The idea that you push leads to wars. Appealing to the reason that Americans can't tell the difference between Iran and the Saudis is because of whiteness and racism.
Okay. Hold on. I'm going to agree with you.
You can't be an anti-imperialist.
I am going to agree.
Racism and imperialism
calm down.
Since the super chat was originally
deep breaths. Let me just quickly respond.
I have to give
just one last quick.
Got to give Eric the last word on this.
This is not a debate. This is a waste of my time.
Well, then go away.
Okay, we've got to give Eric the last.
Your pillow, then.
We've got to give Eric. We're going to give you the last. We've got to give you the last.
Okay, hold on.
I'm going to give you the last word on this, Eric, because the super chat was for you. And then we'll go to the next one.
Very quickly, I agree that sometimes certain types of controlled xenophobic resentment can be utilized to start wars. We saw this when the Jews were promoting anti-Islam sentiment to a reactionary degree without doing anything about immigration. There's some truth to that. What I will say, though, is that on the other hand, another policy the United States is doing.
Yeah, it wasn't the Jews. It was specifically
really quick.
Well,
okay,
yes,
so
3 years old. I mean, why?
Okay, Caleb.
My race is different than this race.
Let me finish, and so we can move on. The point I'm getting at is that the United States government uses a wide variety of tactics. Because right now, Trump and other people are publicly complaining, Steve Bannon, about one, that the Chinese racism against the Uyghurs, and two, they're saying the Chinese are racist because they started this thing where, like, apparently the Chinese are moving black people out of their homes, and so the United States government is calling them racist. So, it can go both ways, Caleb. Does that mean anti-racism is illegitimate? Because the United States government uses the concept of anti-racism to fight all kinds of wars, including the Second World War. Even though the people that were volunteering to fight in the U.S. Army, many of them were Klansmen. I guess they're Antifa too.
Can we move on?
White, let's see. We've got to, if you guys, if you can, I know it's super hard because some of these are really complex questions, so we've got a lot of them to try to move through. And so if we have like short and pithy responses as best as we can, whenever you can. And then White Nail, thanks for your super chat, who said, I seriously doubt the USSR, which promoted globalist revolution, and the US NATO, which promoted open borders and free market, no matter what, were nationalists. They're the ones who flaunted nukes.
Yep. I mean, I don't have any to disagree with there.
I think it was targeted toward the other ones.
Yeah.
Go ahead, guys. If you want to respond, you can.
Can you read that one more time? Because I want to make sure I understood.
You bet. They said, I seriously doubt the USSR, which promoted globalist revolution, and the US.
Yeah, that was what I wanted to say. Globalism is not the same thing as internationalism. Globalism is a liberal thing where they basically want to use money to control the world. Whereas internationalism is a revolution of the workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. And the fact is that, and I wanted to say this earlier, because if we weren't stuck here arguing about this race bullshit, we actually would pose a serious threat to the ruling elite. Because the fact of the matter is that we all have more in common in class interests than we do in race interests. And if we were all united, black, white, Jew, whatever, if you're a worker, you're against the bosses, guess what? They lose instantly.
I don't disagree. I don't necessarily
we got to go move the next one.
So stop making it about white shit.
Well, hold on. I don't necessarily
disagree. We've got to keep
disagree.
moving, guys. I'm sorry to do this. Eric, I've got to keep moving.
Okay, all right.
It's Yeshuda Finkelstein, thanks for your super chat, who said, donating so Enoch can buy some ranch off Amazon.
Let
me just read the rest to be sure that this isn't a troll chat.
It is. I'll tell you that right now. But
okay, gotcha. Yehuda, I'm sorry. Let's see. Oh, it doesn't. It's not too personal though. That's the most personal. They said anti-fascism in the end will lose, like Ernst Thalmann and the original Antifa's lost, but because anti-fascism offers nothing positive, only offering negativity contra nationalism. Hoover like
anti-fascism always wins because the fact is
let's go with Caleb.
Win.
Well,
I'm sorry, Caleb, you go.
I would say that the liberal anti-fascism that was promoted by the CIA, this kind of stupid, diversity is good, liberal stuff. Yeah, that's weak, and it's not going to.
Wait,
fascism.
I thought diversity was good, though.
I mean, it's good. It's weak, and it will lose, right?
So diversity.
I think he means the liberal version of it.
Is with scientific Marxism, with actual class struggle and actual workers' solidarity, and the attempt to equate what I believe in, what people around the world that are fighting imperialism believe in, with the kind of liberal order. That's not accurate, and that we need genuine anti-fascism. We need the anti-fascism that won the Battle of Stalingrad. We don't need the anti-fascism of CNN. I have no question.
Well, you have the
anti-fascism of Barcelona.
Because so sorry to go to the next one, Eric. Otherwise, we'll be here all night.
We're going to be here.
2 hours. Club, thanks for your super chat. Who said nice buzz cut, James? Appreciate that. Lou Duva, thanks for your super chat. Who said press 1 to kick this Caleb guy before he starts. Gotcha. Caleb, thanks for your super chat. Rugal Nigdal, thanks for your super chat, who said Caleb supports an ethno-state for Palestinians, though.
Yeah, and so do I. That's a good policy to have.
I
support all people in the world having their own state. That's not a crazy idea. That's what Ho Chi Minh believes.
Caleb.
Someone going to put words in my mouth. I mean, am I allowed to speak for myself?
Yes.
All right. I mean, am I going to get a sentence out before someone interrupts me? Okay. I would support equal rights for all the people living in that area. That's not the same as an ethno-state. I think the problem is ethnic privileges and such. I believe equal rights for all the people living in that area.
Can I say something?
Brenton, I'm sorry, Brenton. We got to keep moving. Mike got a white male. Thanks for your super chat. Who said mass immigration decreases the value of labor?
Yeah, that's obvious.
That's not even up for debate.
I mean, even if it does, it depends. Because, for instance, if you've got minimum wage and you have people coming in, and they're not working under the table, it can't decrease the value of labor, at least not below that. And really, you're talking about unskilled labor. But also, mass immigration grows the economy.
Let's give him a chance to respond.
Yeah, but mass immigration also grows the economy. In fact, it's the only way that you can rely on.
This is a liberal argument right here.
You know what? It's a libertarian argument. But yeah, they're not wrong. It does. It grows the economy, and it's the only way you can grow a first world economy reliably since birth rates drop off. So what you've got happening here is, yes, so people are coming and there is an initial shock. But the fact is, we don't have a right to stop the free movement of peaceful people, nor is it a good idea, nor is that the compassionate thing to do. What we need to do is organize with those people and make sure that we present a united front. If you took every immigrant, legal and illegal, and you got them into a union with the unions that we have, we could demand wages that give everybody a fair shot. This is the most wealthy nation on the earth, most wealthy nation in the history of mankind. And the very fact that we are divided is the reason why it lowers wages.
I will say something very fast.
If it's like 5 seconds, we can do it. Otherwise,
here's the thing, man. Show me that then, because all we get is the immigrants. All we get is the lower wages. And I don't see any of your socialist revolution happening because these immigrants don't give a fuck about your socialist revolution. They vote.
Given that the original super chat was for Caleb and Brenton, if you have a response, we can give you a quick response.
There's
Otherwise,
clearly an issue with mass migration, right? I mean, the fact that so many people leave their homes, the fact that, there's an issue there, right? The answer is not just escalating means of political repression. This is a global economic problem that must be addressed. I don't, this notion that we're going to solve it by just pretending it's not there and celebrating it as the American dream. I don't agree with that. There is an issue, but the answer that I'm seeing, which is go and kick their ass, raid their homes, escalate, ICE raids, terror, people kicking down doors in the middle of the night, that's not an answer, right? And that's not going to help anybody. But there's clearly an issue, and it needs to be addressed. We need to figure out what to do. And I think China, with their Belt and Road Initiative, raising countries out of poverty, building up domestic economies, probably has the solution there. If we had something like the
how many immigrants has China let in?
People wouldn't be fleeing their homelands.
Lou Duva.
And that the global
how many immigrants are allowed to immigrate to Cuba?
Not matter even if that
China.
was the case. Hang on, can we move on? Because I think James really wants to get this going.
Lou Duva, thanks for your super chat, who said, I, for one, support China's oppression of, I know I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Uyghurs?
Uyghurs.
Uyghurs.
Is the minority group that was mentioned earlier. One of the
terrible thing to say.
Uyghurs. It's a joke. Don't.
I know. It's just
He's playing on.
I am a pawn of your sick, tasteless jokes, people. Tony Dornish, thanks for your super chat, who said, U.S. South would have been safer and therefore more prosperous without forced integration. This applies to cities like Detroit, nations like South Africa.
These guys got to talk before, so let me answer this one. By every metric, including small business ownership, marriage rates, blacks actually were more successful under the Jim Crow laws. And this is objectively true. There are many books about this, like by Thomas Sowell and so on. Black schools actually, hold on. Black schools actually were competitive with certain white schools. And on top of that, blacks had a lower crime rate than Italians and Irish in urban areas in the South. So blacks were objectively better off. Now, from the point of view of a liberal maximalist like yourself, a neoliberal, they weren't better off because there were fewer black millionaires. That's true.
They weren't allowed to be near white people, which is always a terrible thing, right?
It's
always a terrible fate to consign somebody to not being allowed to be around white people. It's the worst thing that could ever happen.
Gotcha. Next up, thanks for your super chat, Arcade Outpost, who says, identity is inevitable. It's futile to misdirect whites from it while other groups are fully invested and encouraged in their own.
Yeah, so identity is important, but white isn't an identity.
Well, just get beat up by nationalists because all they do.
I don't want to. So one challenge is if the super chat is like challenging one side, I want to give that side a chance to respond, because otherwise, if we have
all the super chats are going to be on our side.
Jumping on.
That's the thing. All the super chats are going to be on our side, so we're never going to get to talk.
Tell your people to be on our side then.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of them are. I think a disproportionate of them are,
because our views are more popular.
We might have to take turns.
I didn't bring anybody. I announced this to my fans the way I'm sure you did, and they decided to watch. The fact that I have a lot more than you, well, that speaks for itself.
We'll just reverse it.
I don't have a lot of fans for YouTube because I just started.
Okay, everybody's got a lot of fans. Arcade Outpost, we will go to your question with Brenton if you want to give a quick response, and then we'll give a response from Eric, as he sounded like he wanted to say something.
Sounds good. So I'm sorry, I got thrown by that whole thing. The guy was talking about identity, and it's how identity is important.
Yes. You said it's inevitable.
It's inevitable.
Yeah, identity, of course, is inevitable. But the issue is that white is not an identity. There is not. When you talk about like white, like what do you even mean? Do you mean like the freaking macaroni grill? Do you mean the Sizzler? Do you mean no? The fact is there are genuine identities that white people have. You've got Scotch Irish. You've got German. You've got I'm from the Carpathian Mountains, and occasionally maybe I might like to get together and hang out with people from a similar part of the world, just for the stuff of that. But the fact is that there are three group dynamics, and this is why diversity is both good and bad depending upon how you use it. The first one is many in body, many in mind. This is a disorganized crowd. This is what the neoliberals want us to be, because when everyone is atomized and driven apart and has no uniting principles, well, guess what? They're easy to push around. Then you have one in body, one in mind. And this is the worst excesses of both like ethno-nationalists and like the USSR. It's or even the cartoon version of the USSR. It is where you have forced conformity, where there are not multiple views. It's just everybody's stuck into one thing. And, that leads to birth defects. That leads to not being able to adapt to a changing world. What you need is the principle of many in body, one in mind. And I believe that this is, and if you want to see it in practice, again,
got to move to the next one.
Okay.
James, you got to let me respond to this,
I had some
you
time
have to
here.
let me respond to this.
And he can respond quickly too. We'll share our time. I'll just say something very quickly. The thing is, Brenton, you saying that white is not a legitimate identity it really doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything because you also
it's
say
excluding
that
a huge chunk of this country.
No, because they have their other identities.
Is black a legitimate
those are
identity?
Politically relevant identities.
And neither is white.
Is black a relevant identity?
Yes, but it's because they're treated like crap.
There you go.
End
so
of
there you
story.
go. So this
Bye.
is the point.
This is the
again
point,
because white isn't a thing.
You're just a bigot.
Black
is a thing,
when
but
you
white
say
isn't.
that, wait,
if the police treated the white people like crap because they were white, then it would be a relevant identity. But they don't do that.
I know a white nationalist that's in prison right now for a fucking.
But he's not in prison for being white.
Okay.
Of course he's
not pointless because this is actually the crux of the
hate to
issue.
do this,
Caleb doesn't want to talk about this because he doesn't like talking about this kind of stuff. But when you sit there and you say it's not a relevant identity, it's not a race, that itself is a form of oppression of those people that are classed as that. So, like, you can sit there and say, yeah, I'll believe in the relevant identity of this is everything but you. How do you think white people are going to respond to that? It doesn't even matter. Identity. You can say it's imaginary if you want. But how are white people going to respond? I'll tell you how they're going to respond. They listen to me, not you.
We've got to move forward.
From Ireland. I mean, there's no.
You know what? Wait, hold on.
Gotta let me respond. We got to do this. We're going to give like a really short, response from Caleb, and we'll keep moving.
Whiteness is a negative. It's you're not black or brown. That's what it is. I'm sorry. There is no white nation. There is no white culture. There just isn't. White people are the most.
This right here is a form of oppression of white people. This narrative in and of itself.
White male. Thanks for your super chat. White male who says, do Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey support white nationalism? Last time I checked, they were doing everything possible to ban white nationalists from their sites while allowing anarchists. Allowing anarchists and tankies to post whatever they want. Please tell me tankies isn't a bad word.
It's not a bad word. No.
Okay.
Tankies are supporters of like Joseph Stalin. They're like LARPing communists.
Gotcha. Okay.
But Nazi is a bad word and tanky isn't, right?
I mean, tankies aren't killing anybody.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
ask Connor Betts.
Okay. Connor Betts
I was going to say it, but I don't know if he was.
I'm going to take advantage of Tioga. Thanks for your super chat. Who says fascists never pay, or do they? LOL.
He's saying he's a fascist because he's paying you.
Oh, I see.
But she's not. I don't think she is. Okay, next up. Dev S, thanks for your super chat. I'm flat earth till I flatline. Globe heads get lost. Gotcha. Thanks, Dev, for that.
I mean,
Arthur.
Why am I on here? This is.
You're way too
I'm
serious.
sorry, Caleb. But now
I'm sorry, Caleb.
This is yes. We'll have to get you on for a flat.
You know what? I got to say something about this real quick. You know, it's true. There's a lot of people in the chat that are joking around and saying funny stuff. That's how you relate to the working class.
Yeah.
Okay, you being super serious in your suit and being all uptight about everything. And who gives a shit about you? People like us. They like us because we're funny and we're engaging and we're their buds and we can hang out.
Guys, plenty of people like
that is how you relate to the working class.
No, it's how
you can't do it.
Oh, you got me.
Okay, I mean, it doesn't matter if I've got you. It's objectively true.
You know what this is like, Mike? You know what this is like? This is if you ever watch Adventure Time. This is like,
I swear, like this is like I could go out on the street and argue with some drug addicts. This is like, why am I here?
Hang on, Caleb.
Feel free to go.
I it's all right. We'll work through it. But no, this is like on Adventure Time when you're talking to Caleb about his suit. It's like
I've never watched that show.
Okay, so there's a dog and he's got magical stretching powers.
So you watch shows with magical dogs?
Of course I do.
You're calling us children.
Yeah, when did I call you children?
No, Caleb is doing
now,
that.
no, here's the.
He's also too good to talk to.
We've got to
finish this, please.
I like finish
this, please.
Let's let Brenton.
This is like on Adventure Time because what you have is whenever anybody asks Jake for advice, Jake gives them very specific advice that only applies to Jake. What you need to do is engage your empathy and be able to realize that not everybody is going to use the tactics that you're going to use or approach problems in the way that you approach them. That, again, is the beauty of diversity.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. We got to move. Arthur, fuck's sake. Thanks for your super chat. Who said Tioga is Bay? Caleb, thanks for your super chat. Said James Coons, 2020 Steven Steen for vice president. That's nice of you. Very funny. An Anon user, thanks for your super chat. Who said Marxism is Rousseauian delusion. Anyone calling themselves a Marxist nowadays is a product of bourgeoisie narcissism.
Most Marxists aren't into Rousseau. That's more of an anarchist thing, to tell you the truth.
Rousseau was all about noble savages. He looked backward. He didn't believe in economic development.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
I don't buy that.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Bob Ross for your super chat, who said, in a world that rewards grouping up and pursuing power, how should people of European descent act if they want to exist going into the future? Are we evil for wanting our people to exist?
There you
You're
go.
not evil. Yeah, you're not evil. It can lead to evil.
Oh, you're just factually wrong, right?
No, here's the deal. Okay, so first off, it's a bad idea to pursue power. Like, just straight up, it's something that
the only people you're telling that to are white people right now.
No, I'm telling that to everybody.
Okay, fine, but
that's why you won't say it to blacks.
I will say it to blacks.
Don't
it is a bad idea.
So black power. You don't believe in black power.
I'm against women in boardrooms. I'm against black people in boardrooms because I'm against boardrooms.
What about black organizing on race?
What about black power? Are you against that?
Temporary.
Temporary. Why should they give it up once they have it?
Here's the thing. You should always give up power once you have it because
no one
power
does.
Never gets you.
Why don't you ask
you're
black
just dealing in
people
delusions? No one's going to.
It never gets you what you want. Like seriously, just think about it for a second. Imagine that you're the dictator, and people come up to you and say, "What do you want?"
the editor of the New York Times that shut down
Yeah, and
Wall Street.
Mike Bloomberg and the editor of the New York Times.
Who are they?
Who do they
belong to? Right?
Oh, don't talk about Jews. That's for 3-year-olds.
Crazy.
Are they happy?
People go one at a time.
I probably.
Yeah.
No, they're not. They're freaking miserable.
I can't psychoanalyze them.
Okay.
I can't. I'll tell you.
Let's hear
Mike
1
Bloomberg's
second.
gotta
I
be-
appreciate your gusto. I hate, but just to hear.
Saying.
Caleb is right. Thanks for backing me on that, Caleb. I couldn't agree more. We have to move this fast, and we have to try to. Next up, white male. Thanks for your super chat. Who said the phalangists?
Falun Gong.
Phalangists.
No, he's talking about phalangists, not Falun Gong. Yeah.
Were co-opted by Franco after Marxists captured and killed Rivera. Rivera was opposed to their sort of reactionary capitalism.
That's exactly true. I will tell you this.
Fascism.
I am no fan of Franco. I am a nationalist who supported the Spanish Revolution on the side of the phalangists. And Franco took that revolution off the rails. It was basically like if Trotsky took over instead of Stalin. It was basically Franco was an opportunist and he was a conservative. The phalangists were anti-monarchism, they were anti-capitalists, and they were for a kind of ethnic nationalism. Franco was none of those. He was a clerical conservative, and that's why during the Cold War, he was part of pseudo-NATO or whatever. And also, by the way, Franco and Fidel Castro were good friends, and they were allies too. So I don't know.
The phalangists also hunted people. Like literally hunted humans for sport. It was called Reforma Agraria. They got together, got blessed by the frickin' Catholic Church, and ran down peasants, murdered them, and dumped them in the hole because they had
keep this fast. Okay.
Yeah, and the anarchists put dead bodies out in the public square. That's why the peasants rose up and started killing them. So
the peasants supported the anarchists.
No, they didn't. That's absolutely not true. They lamented the fact that they ran to Franco. They ran to the fascists because of the depredations of the anarchists. Even worse than the Stalinists, actually.
If we spend 4 minutes on every question, we will be here all night.
Let's go.
Anon user, thanks for your super chat, who said appeal to motive is a fallacy. Can't remember when that was. Nobody else does. Arcade Outpost, thanks for your super chat. Brenton says, quote, who cares who it is? Be careful. You might notice a pattern, and patterns are racist.
Humans have pattern seeking where we actually see patterns where there are no patterns. This is behind, like, if you take just a pencil, you draw any weird shape, you can turn it into a face just with one dot. So you're seeing a pattern that doesn't exist.
Right?
That pattern doesn't exist.
Well,
patterns do, but just not that one.
So you're an anti-pattern maximalist.
I just said patterns exist, just not that one.
So there you go.
Gotcha. Next up, appreciate your super chat from, let's see, Manchester Police says, if this debate is about which ideology is more tolerated by the state, it's no contest that communism is. It's able to be merchandised and Nazism isn't. Third position books are censored on Amazon. Communist books aren't.
That's just the old alliance from World War II, first off. And second of all, fascism is merchandised. Look at frickin' Star Wars.
Communism is capitalism's last line of defense, actually. They did all the fighting in World War II and made America a unipower in the world.
And then look at this war, how they did everything they could to avoid fighting Hitler. They only fought him when they basically had no choice. They bent over backwards to appease him. But all throughout the Cold War, every coup, every intervention, millions of Vietnamese, millions of Koreans. I'm sorry. The notion that they're more afraid of fascism than they are of communism is absurd. I mean,
that's because there were no fascists at that time, except for Gaddafi.
After World War II, they went and found all the fascists and hired them. The Galen organization. You can go down the line. So that's.
I don't know if you can really consider Gaddafi fascist. He was just kind of nuts.
He wasn't a fascist. The national hero was
a
Omar
third positionist
who fought against.
Nick Griffin. Some people I know actually know Gaddafi and were guests of his.
This is ridiculous.
People you would call Nazis were honored guests of
Arius
Gaddafi.
Augusta.
Yeah, because he was nuts.
For your super chat. Appreciate it. They said race is so real that I could spit in a tube, and 23andMe can correctly list all 4 of my grandparents' birth cities. Go ahead.
I can respond to that. Yeah, race isn't real because of that. Genetics is real. When they're looking for those specific things and they're like, oh, I want to find this genetic marker from this area. Yeah, they find it. But to call that race being real is what's called begging the question, where you assume the answer in the question itself. Race was created before anyone knew anything about genetics. It is based upon what is convenient for 17th and 18th century empires and nothing else. I mean, the freaking weirdo who first came up with like the whole idea of Caucasian was probably holding my great-great-great-grandfather's skull because he was a freaking weirdo inbred like aristocrat obsessed with skulls. There's nothing there.
Next up, appreciate your super chat. Sky Patrick SS Apollo says race is fake because the Aryan race is the only race. All other races
are.
Yeah, that's hate speech. Don't.
Okay, gotcha. I'm not exactly sure what they mean, but I'll trust you. White male, thanks for your super chat. Says last time I checked, DNA existed in material reality. Haplogroups are de facto categories of race.
Yeah, but they don't work the same way.
Well, let me just quick. They said, do you deny that genes could ever affect intellectual capacity or behavior patterns by affecting brain structure and hormones?
Genes certainly could, but it would not be distributed along racial lines because, again, race move like genetics move below the skin with humans. It is a bucket chain. It moves. Genetic patterns move through the human civilizations in waves, which again is why I can have more in common with somebody in Wuhan than Caleb necessarily. Or anybody else here. The fact is that humans have a very, very shallow genetic pool. And there is no basis for race and genetics. Again, it's just pseudoscience.
So people evolving in different continents for thousands of years is totally inconsequential.
Correct.
Patterns. Okay.
It is totally inconsequential because
ideology, the British Empire that you supposedly oppose, used to oppress people all over.
Who cares? They also believe in gravity. You believe in gravity. Should we reject gravity because of it? Who cares if they believe in it?
This is Malthusianism. This is eugenics.
I don't believe in Malthusianism. The Soviet Union practiced all kinds of weird.
We move on to the next one. We're just going to be yelling at each other.
Stupid Whore Energy strikes again. She says, please provide evidence that any Southern Poverty Law Center article is factually inaccurate.
The Southern Poverty Law Center is a liberal attack group. They are
ad hominem.
Well, it's what they are.
It's an ad hominem. You need to provide evidence.
Perspective
detective. I just want to ask something real quick.
Evidence.
So, Brenton, are you
I disagree with some of their material. I mean, I don't appreciate the way that they categorize black nationalist groups. I don't think that some of the stuff that they say about certain media outlets is
what kind of nationalist groups?
I think there's room for criticism there, but just because they say it doesn't mean it's not true. You know, I mean.
So is Max Blumenthal a Russian agent?
I can explain.
We haven't heard from Mike for a while.
That's what SBLC says, that he's a Russian agent. Max Blumenthal is a Russian agent. Do you agree with that?
SBLC is their own thing.
Okay.
I mean, they've
okay. So you don't
Let's
agree.
get a quick one.
I noticed no one's providing evidence.
I will answer the question.
Yeah.
Now, there are studies that have come out, and the Southern Poverty Law Center has sponsored and amplified these studies that claim X amount of terrorist deaths are created by white nationalists or whatever, and that is like the largest amount or something. But if you look, a lot of these things are classifying certain types of violence, like for example, a prison gang or something like that. Like the guys that
nationalist prison gangs, like that's
yes. Okay, but this doesn't mean a prison gang killing somebody or some kind of fight in a prison where somebody dies is a white nationalist terror attack, because there's black prison gangs and sometimes they kill people. Are those black?
Yeah, but they're not doing just terror.
No, but these. Hold on a second. You said I was allowed to answer the question. Let him answer. So they are classifying criminal behavior And that is the same criminal. Black people engage in this kind of criminal behavior. Mexicans engage in it, and a lot of times they organize themselves into racial type gangs. I mean, MS-13
all
is a
prison
racial
gangs
gang.
are racial,
and prison is a racial system. I mean, if you're in prison,
why is that?
Race
why
is
why does the prison system facilitate?
Well, that's beside the point. That's beside the point. But why then? Hold on a second.
Okay.
Wait. Why then is any?
You might want to divide them. Is beside the point. That's your entire argument.
Let Mike finish. Let Mike finish.
If we function like people in federal prisons.
Let Mike finish.
Gotta give.
Do you think everyone in federal prison like doesn't deserve to be there? I mean, some of these people are murderers.
I'm a prison abolitionist.
This is the hardest part.
The point is this. Let me get to my actual point.
That's going to be empowering for our population.
Let me get to my
Mike
actual
short
point
bit
here.
to get to his point, and then we got to move on.
Let him say his thing.
Right.
Go ahead,
so the
Mike.
point is that racial gangs exist in prison. Only when it's a white racial gang that commits a crime is that classified as a white nationalist terrorist attack. And if you look behind these numbers, I'm not going to deny that Brenton Tarrant was a terrorist attack, and I'm not going to deny a few of the other ones. But where is Connor Betts being listed as an Antifa terrorist attack?
He wasn't
Where
an
is
Antifa.
Alec McKinney being listed as an Antifa terrorist
That's a
attack?
conspiracy theory.
Oh, you can call it a conspiracy theory. Go to the guy's Facebook page. He was clearly supporting Antifa. He was a member of Socialist Rifle Association.
Socialist Rifle Association.
Next up, let's move on. Must move on.
I mean, they just say things. I mean, it's like, yeah.
No,
He wasn't
this
a
is
member of the
proven facts.
Socialist Rifle
These are proven. If he
Association?
wasn't a member of that, he was.
Socialist
Just
Rifle
denying it.
Association is not Antifa, and we don't know
Well,
that
so
he was a member.
okay,
We only
yeah,
know he
so-
shared a meat.
We're at
Moving the
2.5 hours. We have to
I'm
keep
sorry.
moving. But
Okay.
Perspective
So
detective.
now it's no true Antifa then. It's just
Perspective
come on now.
detective.
Antifa is a decentralized organization.
Guys, we
No, it's
really
not.
have to keep moving.
No,
it's like
not.
2.5
I can name
hours
you the
already.
leaders of Antifa right now.
Yeah, that's what
I
I'm
know
saying.
that.
Okay.
2.5
Yeah,
hours.
you can name the leaders of Occupy.
Next up, Perspective Detective. Thanks for your super chat. Who said, "Got no question. Just glad to see a video that's not about flat Earth." Glad to hear that. White male. Thanks for your super chat. Who says, "Nat socialists weren't opposed to the working class. They opposed Bolsheviks who wanted Germany to be a puppet of Russia, and anarchists who opposed who opposed the existence of the state. They made German labor front."
If you support the state, you are against the working class. The state functions specifically to defend the ownership over the means of production by the ruling class. Without the state,
That's why
without the state, without the military and the
This is pure
police.
ideology.
No, it's not. How does a landlord who owns 100 homes collect rent from 100 families saying, you know what, we don't want to pay you anymore, when he doesn't have the police to evict them? He can't. The fact is that without the state, the worker is way better off because they physically possess the means of production. The second the police go away, you know who owns Amazon? Everyone who works at Amazon.
A bunch of warlords.
Hitler crushed the unions. He outlawed strikes. He
So
put
did
all the
Lenin.
leaders of the labor movement.
So did
in
Lenin.
concentration
So did
camps.
Lenin.
Did
Lenin outlaw unions and strikes, Caleb?
I mean, that's,
Yes, he
that's a moot
did.
point.
Yes,
That's a
he
moot
did.
point.
So
Well, I mean, we could
Brent.
talk about Hitler's policy if you want an
The
honest
National
assessment
Socialist
of
Labor
it.
Front was what
Just-
replaced the
Yeah, hang on,
communist
hang on.
Moscow
We gotta move on.
spies that
Working
worked
class.
in the fake
So,
labor
yeah, we got to move
unions.
on now.
boy.
After we-
Working class, thanks for your super chat, who said, "This debate is not socialism versus fascism. It's anti-white hate versus white nationalists. This is pointless. Debate the ideologies."
Yes, I hate white people. Me, the pastiest. I'm literally from the freaking Caucasus Mountains. I'm the whitest person you'll ever meet
Wait,
in
how do
your
you
entire
know?
life.
How do you know though?
My family records.
Well, wait. You're saying that your family determines
Wait,
that you're white,
this is-
like your ancestors?
I think
I'm
he answered the
saying that
question.
by
I think.
that logic.
You know,
Don
every
Giovanni,
word
thanks
I've
for your
said
super
about
chat.
white people.
Don Giovanni
It's
said,
just-
"Bomber Harris, do it again."
Oh, very funny. And we're the killers, right? Bomber Harris murdered hundreds of thousands of innocent women and children who presented no fight in Dresden. Very heroic, and yet we're the ghouls here. We're the ones. We're the exterminationist.
Oh my God!
I'm
I'm
sorry,
sorry. What are we
First
doing
off,
here?
Dresden was a
Every
legitimate military
super chat
target.
says
Like,
by white
Ironic it said
guys.
otherwise.
Yeah,
I don't have to
sure.
stay for
Okay,
this.
so
I'm just
yeah,
saying-
What about
so you
Hiroshima? Do you
support
agree with that?
you support the
Are we
imperialist
waiting for
United
white
States, the
nationalists
capitalist
to
imperialist
send
United
us
States,
fucking
firebombing a
communist
city of innocent
This is a
people
waste of my
because it's a
time.
Yes, when
legitimate
that
target.
city is
There you
controlled
go.
by
We
freaking
have to get-
Nazis.
let's
You know, again,
we haven't heard
congratulations,
Caleb. We
so
haven't
you
heard Caleb
enjoy
for a
my
while.
worst
Let's go back
thing.
You
to Caleb.
support the
One
second,
capitalist
one second.
power.
I want to hear from
I
Caleb.
support
just 'cause we-
anything that takes down Nazis.
Okay, so that's
Okay.
right now. That's capitalism. So
That's
congrats.
capitalism and
You're
liberalism.
welcome
Let's
to
give-
the world. You're a capitalist.
Let's give. All right.
Yeah, I'm
we'll
not a
give Caleb a
capitalist.
quick rejoinder, then we'll move to the next question.
Okay, what am I rejoining to?
Okay, I thought you wanted to tell us this is a waste of your time. Okay, next up,
is there a time limit here? Because I mean, we could sit here and read,
yeah, it's almost midnight.
Edward teenagers all day long.
It is late. I don't know
how many super chats do we have to get through?
We have many super chats to get through.
Well, I mean,
come on, people, show Caleb some love. He's getting grumpy.
I'm sorry. I mean, this is.
I say this to my fans. Show Caleb some love.
Next up. If we can try to keep the answers as short and related to the point as possible. So that's Caleb, thanks for your super chat. Some of these are just quick jokes. This debate is like four Skylers arguing. Very good. Is another guy from the other night. David Hume, thanks for your super chat, who said Lewontin's
Lewontin
fallacy. Yes, this guy doesn't even know the basic talking points.
That's what Brenton is engaging in. What's called Lewontin's fallacy. That's fine.
What's Lewontin's fallacy?
It's your talking points on race are Lewontin's fallacy.
Gotcha. Thanks for your super chat.
It doesn't sound like a real fallacy.
Thank you for your super chat from White Male, who says 200,000 years of evolution in different environments and no effect.
It's not different environments. It's one environment. It's the Earth. And what happens is each group breeds with the group next to it. And again, it carries through like a bucket chain so that you can see those genetics move from continent to continent.
Gotcha.
There are a couple of groups that are actually, but they're uncontacted island tribes. You might be able to consider them a separate genetic race. I don't know.
Gotcha.
Their genetics.
Michael Dresden, thanks for your super chat. It said huge credit to this channel for finally hosting this topic or topics like these. Appreciate that, Michael. Reformed Bugman, thanks for your super chat. Who said, I don't know. Eric, do you see Kyle or did you see Kyle today?
No. I give Corona. Hold on. I give the Corona salute. Keep people at an arm's length at a 45-degree angle.
Right. Well, that's a little bit. That's actually a little bit.
You want to keep your social distancing. And,
Jesus Christ.
And you don't want to shake hands.
Isn't it interesting though that the one? And I am not suggesting that this channel break any of YouTube's rules. I think you do not want to get banned. But why is it that this is what gets you banned?
Because it gets people killed.
So does communism.
No.
Right?
Okay. So communism.
Because I like it.
Communism got people killed in a revolutionary situation.
You can't pretend that the Soviet Union didn't kill people. I mean,
certainly.
Look, he's rolling his eyes.
A revolution is different than random terrorism. Communists will kill.
But these rules were in place before any sort of random terrorism on behalf of supposedly white nationalism happened. And that's not even. I mean, first of all, what about all the anarchists that were bombing things in the 1920s?
Yeah, and if
that was good because that was
today, we
good.
get deplatformed. We're not bombing things today because it's a bad idea to bomb things. Please tell that to your friends on the alt-right.
Yeah, right.
If you read
Who bombs things? Your super chat. Bob Ross.
That it made is that basically the German state apparatus could not defeat Marxism because it needed a pseudo-revolutionary movement in order to do it, and that the German state was unable to beat back the workers' movement, so they needed a fake revolutionary movement that could do it for the German state.
The German state banned the Nazi Party in the 1920s, by the way. They banned the Nazi Party.
The capitalist state couldn't do, he was going to do with this fake revolutionary movement.
Why did the capitalist powers all side with Stalin? The British Empire and the United States government sided with Joseph Stalin.
We must move forward.
Yeah, we're moving forward.
Colonialism.
So sorry to do this. We must move forward. Bob Ross, thanks for your super chat.
You're a lot like Adam
Appreciate
Smith.
it. He said, when it comes to big capital,
Scotsman who saw his people being dragged out of the Scottish
Isles. I piss on Adam Smith.
And he said, "No, we Scottish people can
be
we
must move on."
Can we move forward? Caleb, can we?
Bob Ross. Bob Ross, thanks for your super chat, who said, when it comes to big capital, who gets banned from payment processors, social media, and demonized by every major source of power in the country?
Yeah, because you're killing people.
No. That's not true. Because these things all happened before any of those type of incidents, which, by the way, we don't even.
No, those types of incidents have been growing at least since 2008.
Well, why? Because people are getting banned.
No.
That's not
wait. Are people killing people because people are getting banned from YouTube?
Why aren't Muslims banned from Patreon then?
Yeah,
Muslims
jihadists
all the time. And I'm not even anti-Muslim, but that's a fact.
First of all,
jihadists are banned.
First of all, that is not why this stuff was banned, because this stuff was banned long before any of those things ever happened. You're like Dylan Roof.
Killings by white supremacists have been rising since 2008 at least.
One quick point here, one quick very salient point I'm going to make is that just because someone is a, quote, white supremacist or has a racist view or something and goes on a killing spree doesn't mean that has anything to do with me or Mike. Okay, we're not the ones telling people to do that. No, because it's like the Islam thing. There are some Muslims in ISIS that commit terrorist acts, but then there are other Muslims that aren't.
Even
Muslims that have radical.
Yeah, but those Muslims have a different ideology. You have the same ideology as the guys.
No, they don't.
And you bring people on your programs who say they're, they're exterminationists.
But Whitey on the Moon, thanks for your super chat. Who said race isn't real? White people are colonizers. Which leads to a Bantu is basically your cousin. Is Bantu a bad word?
That's a tribe.
We're
like
supposed
this
to
guy's
share,
a Nazi because he's talking about the moon and shit. But continue.
They said we're supposed to share political power with these people.
Is flat. I mean, come on.
We're supposed to share political power with what?
They said race isn't real, which leads to white people are colonizers, which leads to a Bantu is basically your cousin. We're supposed to share political power with these people. I think they maybe
Yeah, you should absolutely share political power with everyone. The optimal situation of
political power with us?
I don't care if they want to share political power. I'm talking about what's a good situation. The optimal situation of political power.
But you only ever preach this at white people. Why don't you go preach it to
bullshit? No, I don't. You don't even know me. Now continue. Can I please answer?
Nobody can
optimal
answer.
situation for political power throughout history. If we're going to talk about a power vacuum that needs to be filled, traditionally we have filled it with the powers of the state. We have filled it with large, super powerful individuals, either warlords or kings, and large boulders. What we need to do is smash those boulders to pieces and plug the vacuum with 1 million tiny stones. If every person has this roughly the same amount of power as every other person, we all check each other, and that puts us into the best position where we can continue to pursue human flourishing while simultaneously making sure that we don't make foolish decisions.
Cajun Crustacean, thanks for your super chat, who said citation needed for the whole stream. Sky Patrick SS Apollo, thanks for your super chat.
I have my citations here.
They said the privileges you enjoy exist only because your ancestors did not commit genetic suicide and race mix.
Okay, so first off, that's freaking ridiculous because everybody's ancestors bred. No matter who is alive right now, everyone's ancestors bred. Like the privileges that I have right now as like a white guy in America exist partially because of what my family did and partially because the Americans came in and genocided the Native Americans.
So your family has something to do with you being white?
Say what?
Your family being white means that you're white, right?
I mean, I benefit from. I'm perceived as white.
Why should whites take all the bad parts about being white?
Because we keep killing everybody and taking over
any of the good parts.
How do you know
can't we have white pride?
How do you know? Because you can't tell.
British Empire. No, I can see what race is.
I just can also recognize it as a for a while.
So there's
no one ever, dude, Mike. No one ever said that they didn't see race. I can see race. I can acknowledge it.
Right. So you're asking people. You're asking.
Boy, I hate to interrupt, but just we can come back to you really quick, Mike. This is a challenge for me as a moderator. Bear with me, guys. We can give Caleb a shot quick, and then we can give Mike a shot and unmute all. Okay. Caleb, if you have something, I haven't heard from you for a while. I want to give you a shot.
Well, I will again ask how long this is going to go on, because we're repeating ourselves. We're making the same arguments over and over again. This is a complete, I'm sorry. This is, I mean, what's going on here?
Let's just see if we can get through the super chats real quick. What do you got, James? Because I got places to be. I know you guys all do too.
This is like,
yes, on a quarantine at 12 o'clock at night, everyone's got places to be right now. Let's see.
No, I got a kid.
Okay, gotcha. What, folks, do me a favor, but we can't take any more questions. Please don't ask any more questions. Yeah, James, white male.
I'm fine with you cutting the super chats off. I mean, we have been going.
I'm willing, but Caleb looks like he's about to cry.
I'm going to get the
money, and I know you feel obligated to them.
I'm going to get the nastiest emails if I don't read.
Kidding me? I mean, this is juvenile.
Yeah, well, hang on.
Caleb needs a signal because he gets accused of being a Nazbol, so he needs a signal to other leftists that look at me, I hate the Nazis.
Everybody knows he's not a Nazbol.
But that's what they say about him.
What is a Nazbol? Tell me what a Nazbol is.
It's a secret Nazi who pretends to be a communist.
It's something that like liberals have made up to attack communists. That's all.
I mean, there are Nazbols.
Well, I get attacked as a Nazbol.
I've never met an actual.
Yeah, but you tell people you're.
I don't think it's a thing.
Meet Eric Stryker.
That's a dumb rumor.
The only Nazbol I've ever actually heard of is you, and you're a Nazi. So that's it.
Yeah,
gotcha. White male, thanks for your super chat. Who said but I think that like realistically, I'm trying to think of. I'm like, let me do a quick ballpark. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm guessing we have
There's a lot.
Jesus.
Hey, people, stop. Again, send Caleb some love. Okay,
46, 52.
Jesus, 52 questions? There's no way.
We're not going to be able to get through that all.
Yeah, and that's
this is unbelievable. And I'm leaving now, and I'm saying this. I am one of the few leftists.
Get a sense of humor,
man.
Engage
in these kind of debates, but this tonight, this absolute ridiculous clusterfuck waste of my time, really is not encouraging me to do this in the future. This is ridiculous. I mean, what is this? What is this?
Okay.
I'm sorry. I mean, what is this? I mean, we're just
it's true.
Going back, people are doing this. This is not a good use of my time. It's not a good use of Brent's time. This is not serious. This is adolescent. This is amateur. And I'm
the
sorry.
only person acting like a baby here is you.
Die. You know what I'm saying? People die. People get killed, and we're sitting
here. Yeah, by people like you.
Memes and all of this. And I mean, I'm sorry.
That's ridiculous.
This is a waste of my time.
And let's just cut it off right here. I think
it might be a good time.
This is a waste of time. And I'm sorry. If modern day debates, we had a great debate about libertarianism one time where people got to speak.
That's where you're comfortable.
That's
you're losing here because you don't have an argument.
Let's Caleb's been pretty patient. Let's give Caleb a chance here.
This is a waste of my time, and I'd like to end it right now. So can we end?
I don't blame him, folks. If you want to send angry emails to me that your super chat was not read, that's fair game. We appreciate you being here, folks. We appreciate the debaters as they are busy, and they've spent a whopping 2 hours and 43 minutes. That's a long time. So we really do appreciate you guys spending your time with us tonight. We will wrap it up. And so want to say thanks again, though, to our speakers for being here with us. It's been a long one. It's been a battle.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much. And praise if you're listening, and now would be a great time to end the stream, buddy. Are you there?
I'm